Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If? This side. Today we will be seeing what if Deku was experimented on by All for One. Before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. It was a normal day for the Midoriya family. Izuku was playing outside with his friend, Katsuki Bakugo, enjoying the fresh summer breeze. It was just an average day until night fell. After Izuku was tucked into bed and Inko went to sleep, they struck. Silently, they formed a hole large enough in the child's window and sneaked in. They carefully bound the child, taping his mouth shut. One of the kidnappers turned around, his feet lightly hitting the ground as he made his way back to the window. He passed the child to his partner before climbing back through himself. Both broke into a silent sprint, disappearing through a purple and black portal, returning to their hideout. The one holding the child in his arms spoke, his grayish-blue hair falling over his chapped skin as his blood-red eyes scanned over to his boss. His sensei slowly stood up, a smirk stretching over his non-existent face. Skin molded over where his eyes and nose used to be, leaving only his mouth visible. His black suit glistened in the moonlight pouring in through a cracked window, illuminating the rundown bar around them, where alcohol lined rows upon rows of rotting wooden stands. A job well done, Tamura. We can finally start our little experiment. Let's see if this hypothesis works. He took the still sleeping child from Tamura and headed down to a basement area. Once down, he opened a dark wooden door, entering a testing lab. Large tubes filled with toxic green liquid surrounded them, and numerous Noumus lay scattered about, some in various states of decay, alongside all sorts of tools used for dissection and injection. A single metal bed lay in the center, a tray of tools set by its side. The tall, faceless man placed the child down, strapping him to the bed tightly before shaking him awake. Izuku's bright green eyes fluttered open as a yawn escaped his lips. He tried to sit up, only to realize he was stuck. His breathing quickened as he frantically glanced around the room, his eyes landing on the figure who had trapped him there. He stuttered in fear, his eyes widening as tears threatened to fall. He asked who they were and where he was. "You may address me as All for One. As for where you are, well, that's for me to know, and for you not to," the man chuckled as he watched Izuku squirm, trying to free himself from the restraints. "There's no use trying to escape." He grabbed a needle in his right hand, filling it with a sea-blue liquid. In his left hand, he held a knife, its steel blade shining in the dim light from above. He traced it down Izuku's arm, drawing a line that caused a small yelp of pain to escape the child's lips. All for One's smirk grew wider as he prepared to inject the needle into Izuku's neck. "Let's have some fun," he said, his voice laced with amusement. Izuku cried out, pleading for it to stop as he felt the effects of the injection. "It'll all be over soon, kid," All for One assured him. Izuku's cries for help echoed in the lab. Meanwhile, Inko was on the phone, sobbing as she explained that her son had been kidnapped the night before. She described finding a hole carved into the window of his room, the only clue she could find. The operator assured her that a detective would be sent over. After hanging up, Inko waited anxiously until a knock on the door snapped her out of her trance. She rushed to open it, revealing a detective who showed his ID card. He followed her to her son's empty room, examining the scene. He picked up the rough cutout of glass on the ground and sent officers to search for clues outside. Turning to the distressed mother, he spoke in a calming tone, assuring her they would find her son. Inko dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks as she cried out about her baby being missing. The detective promised her that he would find him. In the lab, Tamura yelled at Izuku to stop squirming, claiming it only made things harder. Izuku cried out in pain as the effects of the chemical injected into him intensified. It was a glowing neon green, coursing through his bloodstream. As he screamed, Tamura continued to strike him, leaving marks on his skin. It had been a week since the treatments began, and each day brought new torment. They always ensured he stayed alive, no matter what. "Stop now. He can't die on us yet," All for One's voice echoed as he entered the room. Tamura dropped the whip, leaving the room so All for One could continue his work. The faceless man approached the child, stroking back his green locks as Izuku stared up at him in fear. I think it's time we crank this up a bit, eh? All for one said, his smirk widening as he took up another needle, preparing to inject Izuku once more. The crimson liquid from a Noumu flooded into Izuku's system, eliciting shrieks that echoed through the lab. Won't be long now, All for one murmured as he left the room, closing the door behind him. My masterpiece will be completed no matter what. 3 years passed. Toxic green liquid drained from a tube as the glass opened up. An 8-year-old child fell into the arms of the faceless man. His eyes slowly opened, looking up at the man. Scars lined his face from previous encounters, his right eye the usual green, but his left. A clock appeared to be embedded in his eye, shining in gold. He stood tall, gazing at the leader of the League of Villains with a smirk. The experiment was complete, and it had succeeded. Tamura rushed into the basement, urgency in his voice as he warned that the heroes had arrived. His eyes, obscured by a disembodied hand, landed on All for One, who was busy stitching up Izuku's torso. The urgency escalated as All for One ordered Tamura to evacuate everyone. He waved him off, focused on his work with the new human Noumu. Gathering various testing tubes, tools, and samples scattered around, he prepared to escape. A purple-black portal opened beside him, indicating that Kurogiri had successfully gotten everyone else to safety. He tossed the supplies into the portal just as loud commotion erupted outside the decaying door. Before he could reach Izuku, a bullet fired through the door, striking his outstretched hand. He cursed under his breath as the door burst open, nearly hitting Izuku, who sat emotionless on the metal bed. Policemen stormed in, guns raised and firing at All for One. Pro-heroes Eraserhead and Snipe joined the fray, attempting to capture him. All for One realized he couldn't reach the child in time and retreated into the portal, which vanished behind him, leaving only the policeman and the blank-faced child. Eraserhead approached Izuku, lowering his weapon and ruffling the boy's hair. He expressed concern for what had happened to Izuku, scooping him up in his arms. He instructed his team to search the surrounding area for anything useful and to report back after their search. The pro who held Izuku quickly left the hideout and drove him to a nearby hospital, where he was taken for surgery. Eraserhead contacted Detective Naomasa to inform him that they had found the boy. Izuku sat quietly on the white bed, staring vacantly out the window. A bandage was wrapped around his left eye, and his curly green hair fell over it. The sound of a door opening broke his trance, and he turned to see a nurse enter. She greeted him warmly, asking how he was feeling while brushing back some strands of her black hair. Izuku slowly lowered his head, looking at his bandaged hands. The nurse sighed softly and sat on the edge of the bed, gently squeezing one of his hands for comfort. She mentioned that someone was there to see him, waiting for a reaction. Izuku looked up briefly before returning his gaze to his hands. The nurse stood and left the room, only to return moments later with a short woman who had long green hair. She approached Izuku and took a seat beside him. She called his name softly, gaining his attention. She asked how he felt and how his head was. Izuku murmured that he was fine, though everything was still a bit fuzzy, and he couldn't quite remember what had happened. Inko took his hand, gently stroking it with her thumb. Detective Naomasa entered the room, accompanied by a doctor and another nurse. Inko tightened her grip on Izuku's hand as Naomasa requested that she leave the room for a few tests. At the mention of tests, Izuku froze, his eyes widening in fear. He began to hyperventilate, clutching his chest. Inko quickly grabbed his shoulders, soothing him and encouraging him to take deep breaths. She reassured him that he was safe and apologized to Naomasa for the misunderstanding, explaining that certain words could trigger stress for Izuku. Naomasa acknowledged this and approached the bed, assuring Izuku that they only needed to ask a few questions and that he was safe. Izuku nodded slowly, still a bit shaky. Inko kissed his forehead before leaving with a small wave. Naomasa brought out several sheets of paper, each containing quizzes on different subjects. The doctor and nurse set up a table and chairs for the examination. The nurse informed Izuku that they would be removing the bandages from around his eye and asked him to inform them if he felt any pain. As she began to unwrap the bandage, it fell away, allowing Izuku to open both eyes. He was startled to see a golden eye that resembled a clock. his gaze shifted to the table with the papers, and a golden hue surrounded them before they shot back to their original positions. The papers scattered, swirling around him before returning to the stunned detective. In a panic, Izuku covered his eye with his hands while the doctor noted something on his clipboard. The doctor remarked that the transmission of a quirk had been successful and that the villains were aware of what they were doing. He suggested starting with the quirk, as it could become problematic if not addressed. The nurse noted that it seemed to only affect inanimate objects and emphasized the need to be cautious during the checkups. The doctor retrieved a case containing glasses, sunglasses, and contact lenses. He instructed Izuku to remove his hands and place the glasses on his nose. When Izuku focused on the sheet of paper Naomasa had thrown, nothing happened. The doctor switched to the sunglasses, but again, nothing occurred. Finally, he tried the contact lenses, and the paper flew back to Naomasa's hand. The lenses were removed, and the glasses were put back on. The nurse explained that Izuku's quirk, named Clockwork, activated when he opened the affected eye or eyes, reversing time on any object he focused on. There were no known ways to deactivate the quirk, but he could cancel it by closing or covering his eyes. The doctor asked Izuku if he was all right, to which he nodded. They informed him that they would need him to answer some quizzes, which were elementary and up. Naomasa handed Izuku the sheets of paper and a pencil. The three of them exited the room and sat just outside as Izuku began answering the questions. They seemed simple, almost childish. Izuku thought to himself that they must have underestimated him. He murmured that he needed to finish the quizzes, wanting to be left alone. One of his companions teased him, insisting that he couldn't get rid of them as they were stuck together. Izuku protested, stating that he never asked for this situation. The voice in his head responded, revealing that it was created by their sensei, just like his quirk. Izuku felt a surge of anger as he recalled the pain that had come with their transformation. No matter how much he screamed or begged, the torment never ceased. The memories haunted him, and he struggled to forget them. The voice reminded him that the sensei wanted him to remember. In frustration, Izuku shouted for silence, not wanting to deal with the voice any longer. The voice conceded but hinted that it would not truly disappear. After completing the quizzes, Izuku called Naomasa, the doctor, and the nurse back into the room. Naomasa's worried expression did not go unnoticed, but he took the papers to mark them without voicing his concerns. Naomasa thanked Izuku for his time and bowed slightly before leaving the room. The doctor and nurse conducted a few more checkups before departing as well. Alone once more, Izuku lay back down, staring out the window at the darkening sky. Thoughts raced through his mind as he tried to block out the nagging voice that echoed within him. He closed his eyes, hoping for some rest. Suddenly, he was jolted awake, panting and clutching his chest. Rage surged within him, and he punched the wall, feeling the sting of pain as blood trickled down his knuckles. Laughter turned to sobs as he grasped his hair, tears streaming down his face. In a moment of desperation, he tore off his glasses and wrapped a piece of his nightgown around his left eye. After cleaning the blood from his hand, he collapsed back onto the bed, his vision blurred by tears. He closed his eye, surrendering to the darkness. The sound of a heart monitor stirred Izuku from his slumber. He opened his green eye to see a nurse writing on a notepad. Their eyes met, and she acknowledged his awakening, asking how he felt. He replied that he felt okay, though internally he knew he was lying. He murmured to himself, expressing annoyance at the voice in his head, which promised to remain quiet. Izuku found himself alone again, feeling the familiar sting of isolation. He sat up, muscles aching, but he ignored the pain and removed the 4 from his arm. After retrieving his glasses, he climbed out of bed and landed softly on the ground. He cautiously approached the door, which opened automatically. Peering out, he saw that the coast was clear. Clutching his glasses, he ran down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps nearly inaudible. Upon reaching the stairs, he heard voices below and decided to wait. The voice in his head directed him to a nearby laundry room for new clothes. Following the instructions, he opened the door to the laundry room and found it empty. He quickly changed into a black shirt, a green hoodie with bunny ears, ripped jeans, and socks. He found a pair of dark red sneakers by the door and put them on. After removing the cloth from his left eye, he adjusted his glasses and prepared to make his escape. The voice reminded him to check the stairs again. Hearing quieter conversation, he crept down the stairs, pressing himself against the wall to listen. The discussion revealed that there was something unusual about him, mentioning the experiments he had endured. Izuku felt a wave of anxiety wash over him but focused on his goal of escape. He took deep breaths to calm his racing heart, pressing his ear against the cold metal of the door. The conversation continued, discussing how he had changed since being brought to the facility. As the voices faded, Izuku seized the opportunity. He opened the door and dashed toward the exit, ignoring the shouts behind him. The large glass doors were in sight, the bright sky illuminating his path. He removed his glasses, concentrating on the doors as they swung open, granting him freedom. They were within reach. Izuku didn't care. In the basement, no one listened to him. Why should he listen to these strangers? He ran out, skidding as he turned left. He adjusted his glasses as he dashed down the cobbled path. He was free. Finally free. This was all he ever wanted. Izuku sprinted down the street, his gaze fixed on the ground. Just as he turned the corner, he collided with someone. Rubbing his head, he looked up at a tall man dressed in black, with long, scruffy black hair draping over his shoulders, covered by a long bandage-like scarf. He felt a rush of panic. That was Eraserhead. How did he know this? He mentally scolded himself for his thoughts. He was overwhelmed, realizing he could communicate with his mind. He needed to focus. Eraserhead was right in front of him. The pro-hero crouched down and asked if Izuku was all right, noting his hurried demeanor. Izuku stuttered, glancing around nervously while fiddling with the bottom of his hoodie. He felt lost and confused. Eraserhead picked him up off the ground, and Izuku was startled. What was happening? Eraserhead stated that he was taking Izuku to the hospital for some rest. Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief, searching Eraser's face for any sign of a joke. The man's serious expression confirmed he was not joking. Izuku struggled in Eraser's grip, tugging at his clothes, but it was no use. He sighed in defeat as they entered the large glass doors of the hospital. At the front desk, the receptionist expressed her gratitude to Eraserhead for finding Izuku, who had run off without warning. Izuku struggled against the brunette's grip, feeling trapped. Anger and frustration clouded his mind as he willed his new quirk to do something, anything to help him. A golden hue surrounded the lady, and she froze. Seizing the opportunity, Izuku escaped her hold, landing on the white marbled ground with a thud. He murmured in pain, rubbing his head. The receptionist blinked in surprise, staring down at the child on the floor. Izuku stood up and hid behind Eraser's legs, hissing at the lady. Eraser stared in disbelief at the child who glared at the receptionist. He picked Izuku up again, this time without any trouble, and adjusted the glasses back on his nose. Eraserhead commented on how Izuku really didn't like the hospital. The receptionist explained that he barely responded to questions and disliked it when they tampered with the cords. She added that he became anxious when words like experiment or test were mentioned. Eraser nodded in understanding, subconsciously petting Izuku's long, curly green hair. He then asked if Izuku had any parents. The receptionist replied that he had a mother who came by regularly to check on him. Eraser suggested that Izuku seemed well enough to return to her. He requested her address so he could drop him off. The receptionist hesitated, concerned about causing any trouble, but Eraser reassured her that it was fine since he wasn't working. After receiving the address, Eraser quickly left the hospital with Izuku still in his arms. Halfway down the street, Izuku finally voiced the question that lingered in his mind. He asked Eraserhead what he meant by saying, "You're my son now," since he already had a family. Eraser started to sweat, mentally scolding himself for letting that slip. He admitted that it had just come out without thinking. Izuku accepted this response too quickly, leaving him feeling uneasy. As they neared home, Izuku felt relieved to be out of the hospital. They arrived at his house, and Eraser placed him at the entrance before knocking on the door. Footsteps echoed inside, and the door swung open to reveal a long green-haired woman. Inko was shocked to see Eraserhead and stammered in surprise. He gestured down to Izuku, who hugged his mother tightly. Startled, Inko embraced him back with a smile. Eraser explained that Izuku had run out of the hospital, and the receptionist said he was well enough to come home. Inko's expression shifted to one of disbelief, and she thanked Eraser for bringing her son back. Izuku smiled at Eraserhead, expressing his gratitude before running inside the house. After saying his goodbyes, Eraserhead walked away, leaving the mother and son to themselves. He trudged along the cobbled streets back to his apartment, where he found his roommate, Hisashi Yamada, broadcasting his radio show. Naomasa sat at his desk, furrowing his brows as he reviewed some documents. He rubbed his temples and sighed heavily. Leaning back in his chair, he was interrupted by a knock at the office door. It opened to reveal a tall, skeleton-like blonde. He greeted Naomasa with a small smile, but it vanished upon seeing his friend's expression. Concerned, he asked if something was wrong. Naomasa replied that there was something strange about a particular child. He explained that villains had conducted many experiments on him, leaving him unsettled. Toshinori placed a comforting hand on Naomasa's shoulder and asked if he could take a look at the documents. Naomasa sighed and handed them over, feeling the weight of the situation. The document detailed a young boy named Izuku Midoriya. At just 9 years old, he had a quirk called clockwork, which had been forced upon him by villains, affecting his left eye. He stood at 4 feet 1 inch, with curly green hair, large eyes, one green and one gold, and pale skin adorned with freckles. He had been missing for 3 years, only to be found in a villain's base, hidden away in a basement. His bloodstream contained various chemicals, and though many of his wounds and fractures had healed, the scars of his past remained. Toshinori's eyes widened as he read through the document, murmuring about the hardships the boy had endured. Naomasa commented on how fortunate they were to have found him when they did, noting that if they had been any later, the outcome could have been dire. The hospital had done their best to care for him, but certain trigger words still caused him distress, reminding him of his traumatic experiences. Despite their efforts, Izuku remained silent about what had happened to him. All they knew was that he had been subjected to experiments and had the clockwork quirk implanted. Naomasa continued, expressing his frustration at the situation. He mentioned that Izuku was nearly at a university level in education, aside from his physical abilities, and that he seemed to converse with a voice in his head. The more they learned about him, the stranger things became. Naomasa felt uncertain about how to approach the situation. Toshinori encouraged Naomasa, reminding him that he had never given up on a case he believed was possible. He believed in Naomasa's ability to help the boy and urged him to have faith in himself. Naomasa sighed but nodded, determined to see what he could do. Meanwhile, Inko called up to her son, Izuku, announcing that dinner was ready. He responded that he would be down shortly. In the meantime, he was busy reorganizing his room, packing away most of his All Might merchandise and replacing it with books and study materials. After changing his bed covers to plain white ones, he hurried downstairs, placing the boxes by the door before joining his mother at the table. They both expressed gratitude before enjoying a meal of katsudon. Inko reminded Izuku to slow down as he eagerly devoured his food, happy to see him enjoying it. After finishing, he quickly cleaned up and hugged his mother before returning to his room. Once inside, he removed the All Might-themed name tag from his door and replaced it with a plain one. His room, now filled with books and study notes, reflected his new focus. The moonlight illuminated his green walls, revealing a cleaner space with organized clothes and a simple bed. Feeling satisfied with the changes, Izuku acknowledged that it was getting late. He decided to shower and get ready for bed. After quickly washing up and brushing his teeth, he felt a wave of sleepiness wash over him. As he lay in bed, he contemplated asking the voice in his head, Deku, if it could take control of his body. When he received no response, he ventured into his mind to seek answers. He found Deku sitting on a small green lounge and pressed for a reply. Deku finally admitted that it could take over, but only had done so once before when Izuku was asleep. Izuku pondered this revelation, realizing it made sense. Feeling tired, he decided it was time to sleep. A month had passed since Izuku left the hospital, and he was now enrolled in the same junior elementary school as his childhood friend, Katsuki Bakugo. He donned his black uniform, adjusting his glasses and tracing the scars on his face, particularly around his golden eye. After brushing his curly hair, he grabbed his yellow backpack and dashed downstairs. He greeted his mother, eager not to be late, while quickly checking his belongings. Inko expressed her concern, prompting Izuku to double-check his bag before grabbing his lunch and heading out the door. He quickly hugged his mother, taking the toast out of his mouth before planting a kiss on her cheek. He giggled a bit, thanking her for the reminder. He announced that he would be off now and rushed out the door, jumping down the steps of the front porch and hurrying down the street. As he ran, he quickly finished the toast, his eyes focused ahead while skillfully avoiding pedestrians. Upon reaching the train station, he purchased his ticket and waited, glancing at the clock as time ticked by. A hesitant voice called out to him from behind, prompting him to turn his head curiously. It was Katsuki, his childhood friend, staring down at him with wide eyes that took in Izuku's mismatched gaze. After a moment of surprise, Katsuki took a step back to gather his thoughts, struggling to find the right words. Izuku simply smiled, a genuine expression that highlighted the faint blush on his cheeks. He greeted Katsuki, who seemed taken aback by the change in his friend. Katsuki wondered what had happened to the boy he once knew, noticing the glasses perched on Izuku's nose. He cautiously approached, asking about Izuku's quirk, which had clearly altered his appearance. Izuku explained that his quirk was called clockwork, allowing him to reverse time on objects within his sight. He elaborated that he could even freeze a person if he focused on them, but he needed the glasses to prevent accidental use of his quirk, which he was still learning to control. His words tumbled out in excitement until Katsuki interrupted him with a light smack to the head, telling him to stop mumbling, which made Izuku pout and rub his sore head. Despite the teasing, Izuku felt a sense of comfort in their banter. They leaned against the sturdy concrete wall in a comfortable silence, listening to the clock above them. The minutes felt like an eternity, and Izuku found himself growing impatient, wishing for the train to arrive. When the train finally pulled into the station, they boarded and found seats near the exit. As the train filled with passengers, Izuku, feeling drowsy from waking up early, rested his head on Katsuki's shoulder. Katsuki questioned what he was doing, but Izuku pleaded for a moment of rest, giving him puppy dog eyes. Reluctantly, Katsuki agreed, allowing Izuku to settle comfortably against him. In his mind, Izuku found himself in a different space where his alter ego, Deku, was training hard. He watched as Deku practiced, pouring water over himself to cool down after an intense workout. Izuku tossed him a bottle of water, and Deku gratefully accepted it, drinking half before splashing the rest on his face. Izuku enjoyed the sight, feeling a sense of camaraderie as Deku playfully cannonballed into a pool that appeared before him. As the train approached their destination, Izuku reluctantly returned to reality, sitting up straight and yawning. They disembarked and walked up the street to Aldika Junior High. A wave of nervousness washed over Izuku as he entered the school, sticking close to Katsuki's side. They made their way to the principal's office to collect Izuku's schedule and locker code before heading to their first class together. Before entering the classroom, Izuku hesitated, grabbing Katsuki's arm and turning him around. Katsuki teased him about being scared, and Izuku admitted his anxiety about being away for so long and not knowing anyone but him. Katsuki gave him a gentle smack on the head, encouraging him to stop complaining and to take the first step inside. With a lump in his throat, Izuku took a deep breath and slid open the door. A few students turned to look, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion. Izuku froze, sweat forming on his forehead as he felt their eyes on him. Katsuki, sensing his discomfort, firmly pushed him forward, scowling at the other students. A classmate called out to announce the new student, prompting cheers from the class. Izuku stiffened, hiding behind Katsuki as he felt overwhelmed by the attention. The teacher entered, clapping his hands to gain the students' attention and welcoming Izuku to the class. The teacher asked everyone to come up to the front and introduce themselves. As Izuku walked to the front, he pushed his glasses up and turned to face the class. He greeted everyone, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. After a slight bow, he stood straight, trying to meet the many curious gazes of his classmates. The thought of being the center of attention was overwhelming. Once he returned to his seat next to Katsuki, the class resumed. Despite the teacher's voice, Izuku could feel the weight of his classmates' stares. He tried to focus on the lesson, taking notes even though he was already familiar with the material. Eventually, he found himself doodling in the back of his notebook or chatting with Deku, who seemed bored and lost in thought. Deku asked what Izuku was drawing, and Izuku replied that it was a bunny. Deku teased him about his love for cute things, mentioning that he had been thinking about katsudon since breakfast. Izuku defended his interests, not wanting to be scolded for his preferences. Deku reminded him to pay attention, as the teacher was about to ask questions. Izuku turned his focus back to the front, just in time to hear the teacher call on a classmate. As he waited for his turn, he zoned out, only to be jolted back to reality when a crumpled ball of paper hit him on the head. His glasses slipped off, and he quickly adjusted them, noticing the ball had returned to the student who threw it. The class buzzed with excitement over the display of quirks. The teacher asked who had thrown the paper and who had used their quirk. A navy-haired boy in the back admitted to throwing the paper, while Izuku sheepishly raised his hand, explaining that he couldn't fully control his quirk yet. The teacher reassured him, understanding that he was new and still learning the rules. As class continued, the bell rang, signaling the end of the PRD. Students began to chatter excitedly. Some classmates asked Izuku to demonstrate his quirk again, and he turned to Katsuki for support, feeling uncertain. Katsuki encouraged him to go ahead, and Izuku agreed, earning cheers from the others. He needed someone to throw or move an object, and a classmate complied by tossing a table toward the door. Izuku focused, using his quirk to lift the table back to its original spot, impressing everyone around him. After the excitement, the second PRD ended, and students rushed to the cafeteria for lunch. Izuku asked Katsuki how long the wait for food would be, to which Katsuki replied that it could take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the lunch lady's mood. They finally reached the front of the line, and Katsuki jokingly engaged the lunch lady, who responded with a playful reprimand. With their trays filled, they found an empty table in the corner and began to chat while eating. Their conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and shared stories. Suddenly, a tap on Izuku's shoulder drew his attention. He looked up to see a brunette girl and a blonde boy. The girl introduced herself as Hiyori Iki and confirmed that Izuku was indeed Izuku Midoriya. She extended her hand, and he shook it, noticing the shy boy beside her. Hiyori sat next to Izuku, and they began to converse, soon joined by a few other classmates. Intrigued by Hiyori's mention of someone named Yato, Izuku leaned in, eager to learn more about this mysterious figure she described as a god. He called himself a god, but all he did was chores for others. If he wasn't doing that or bothering them, he was either sleeping or spray painting his number everywhere, Hiyori thought, sighing in irritation. Yato could be annoying. He could be nice and fun at times, but he was always pestering them, Yukain added, leaning his head on his hand. Before they could continue their conversation, the alarm bell started ringing. The group hastily jumped up, leaving their food behind as they joined the large crowd rushing out of the cafeteria. Katsuki grabbed Izuku's hand, keeping him close as all the students ran down the hallways. Izuku felt himself being pushed back by the many students shoving around him, wondering what was happening. It could either be a drill or someone breaking in. He felt reassured by Deku's thoughts, knowing he would find out soon. As they exited the school building, the students turned toward the training grounds and rushed over. They finally came to a halt, seeing the teachers moving around in front of them as they checked the roll. There was speculation among the students about whether someone had broken in, but most believed it was just a drill. Izuku sighed in relief when the teachers confirmed it was indeed a drill. He moved back from Katsuki a few centimeters but still held onto his hand. The teachers led everyone back through the exit doors they had just used. That was anticlimactic, Izuku thought, hoping the day would end soon. Class was boring since he already knew everything. As he and Katsuki entered their classroom and sat down with their classmates, the teacher entered, clapping his hands together to gain everyone's attention. Now that the drill was over, it was time to start class. Izuku mentally groaned, knowing it would be tedious. At least Deku could create whatever he wanted while he had to sit through the lecture. Deku decided to play some music in Izuku's mind, which helped ease his boredom. A small smile formed on Izuku's face as the music played in his head. He began to draw, a pastime he enjoyed whenever he had nothing to do. He still answered the questions, but he waited in anticipation for the school day to finally end. As the wind blew through the air, chatter filled Aldika Jr. as students walked out in large groups. Izuku waited by his locker for his new friends, humming to himself with a small smile on his face. Hiyori called out, apologizing for keeping him waiting as she, Yukain, and Katsuki came to a halt in front of him. Izuku reassured them it was fine, mentioning that Tachibana and Otanishi had gone on ahead. They left the school, chatting with each other, except for Katsuki, who wore a scowl. They walked down the cobbled pathway, deciding to head to a nearby cafe called Oliver Green. After finding a table and looking through the menus, Yukain asked Izuku about the scars on his body, gaining his attention. Izuku hesitated, scratching his cheek as a look of discomfort crossed his face. He admitted he didn't really like talking about it, and Yukain quickly apologized for bringing up bad memories. A waiter came over to take their orders before walking off. They engaged in small talk, with Katsuki opening up a bit, though he still wore his permanent scowl. Their orders arrived, and the conversation faded, with only occasional comments. Izuku pushed his glasses up, his thoughts racing back to memories at the villain's base, the beatings, the chemicals, the screams filling the toxic air, and being trapped in the basement. His heart raced as he tried to control his breathing to avoid alarming his friends. Katsuki noticed something was off and whispered to Izuku, expressing concern as he nudged him, asking why he was shaking. Izuku forced a smile, insisting he was fine, but Katsuki didn't seem convinced. Instead of pressing further, he shoved food into Izuku's mouth, who accepted it without protest, knowing Katsuki struggled to express his feelings well. After finishing their food and drinks, they paid and left the cafe, chatting happily until Izuku suddenly stopped, turning his head toward an alleyway. His friends questioned him, noticing the emotionless expression on his face as he stared into the darkness. He heard a voice calling his name, urging him to come closer, but he tried to shake it off, telling himself there was no one there. Katsuki snapped him out of it, demanding to know what was wrong. Izuku apologized, sheepishly admitting he thought he heard something. Katsuki sighed in annoyance, grabbing Izuku's hand and pulling him along. Izuku glanced back, confusion in his eyes, but he shrugged it off, pushing the voice's comments to the back of his mind. He heard Deku sigh in relief as they caught the train and headed home, going their separate ways. Katsuki stayed close to Izuku the entire way, gripping his hand tightly. When they reached Izuku's house, Katsuki turned to him, gripping his shoulders and gazing into his eyes, demanding to know if he was all right. He had been acting strangely since they left school, and Katsuki wanted to know what was wrong. Izuku looked away, and Katsuki gently turned his face back to meet his gaze, prompting him to finally speak up. When Yukain inquired about the scars, memories flooded back. Izuku's heart raced as he heard a voice in the alleyway. He turned his head, eyes wide with fear, scanning the neighborhood for any sign of danger. In his shaken state, he pulled Katsuki into a tight hug, burying his face in the blonde's chest. It felt like the presence was closing in again, and Izuku stuttered, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. He expressed his confusion and fear, unsure of what to do. Katsuki, trying to maintain his composure, urged him not to cry, doubting there was anyone out there. Suddenly, Katsuki froze, a chill creeping down his spine as the cold wind whipped around them. He held onto the trembling green net protectively, glancing around frantically. He shouted into the darkness, demanding to know who was there, his hands sparking with small explosions. The voice responded, introducing itself as Shigaraki, but claimed that it wasn't important. The figure was there to reclaim what they had lost. Izuku's breath hitched at the name, and he continued to offer reassuring words to Katsuki, who was trying to keep calm. Shigaraki demanded Izuku, stating that he would leave without a fight. Katsuki vehemently refused, declaring he wouldn't allow Shigaraki to harm Izuku again. The tension escalated, and Shigaraki indicated that they would have to settle this by force. A purple portal opened further down the street, illuminated by a street lamp. A figure emerged, covered in dismembered hands, followed by a misty figure and a giant bird-like creature. The hand-covered figure scratched at its neck, its blood-red eyes fixed on the two boys huddled together. Izuku froze, wide-eyed, as the villains approached. Katsuki, fueled by determination, declared he would take them on. He released Izuku, who hid behind him, and prepared for battle, explosions erupting from his hands. The villain known as Noumu was instructed to handle Izuku, as they only needed the grenade. Izuku urged Katsuki to dodge, gripping the blonde's uniform as he propelled himself to the side. He warned Katsuki that the creature was too strong and advised him to focus on Shigaraki instead. Katsuki reluctantly told Izuku to hide and call for help while he engaged the villains. As Katsuki dodged the Noumu's attacks, he felt his energy waning. Just as he landed, the Noumu struck him hard, sending him reeling. Despite the pain, he pushed himself back to his feet, glaring at the creature. He clenched his fists, readying his explosions, and launched himself forward, narrowly avoiding the Noumu's grasp. In a moment of focus, he reached out toward Shigaraki, but time seemed to slow as a portal appeared, pulling him back. He twisted away from the Noumu, landing safely as he noticed the creature had stopped moving. He looked back to see Izuku using his quirk to freeze the beast in place. Grateful, Katsuki rushed toward Shigaraki, dodging the villain's grasp and pinning him down as sirens wailed in the distance. Katsuki threatened Shigaraki, warning him not to move. The villain taunted him, but before he could react, Katsuki pushed his face into the ground. Just then, Katsuki was caught off guard by a hand gripping his face, forcing him to release Shigaraki. As he struggled, Izuku burst onto the scene, delivering a powerful kick to Shigaraki and then turning his attention to the Noumu. He swiftly incapacitated the creature, but the villains managed to escape, leaving no trace behind. Izuku rushed to Katsuki's side, bombarding him with questions about his condition. Katsuki brushed him off, insisting he was fine, though he admitted to feeling the effects of the Noumu's attack. Just then, police cars arrived, and officers quickly approached the two boys. One officer asked if they were all right and what had happened. Izuku explained that Katsuki was injured and that the villains had escaped through a warp quirk. The officer thanked them for the information and offered to take Katsuki to the hospital, asking if Izuku knew where his parents were. Izuku led the officer to the Bakuga household, where they knocked on the door. A tall woman with ash-blonde hair answered, her expression shifting from confusion to concern as the officer explained the situation. She followed them back to the car where Katsuki was seated, and upon seeing her son, she rushed over to embrace him. After a moment of relief, she began to scold him for being reckless, prompting Izuku to recount the events to her and the police, describing the villains and their appearance. The police expressed their gratitude before escorting Katsuki and Mitsuki to the nearest hospital. Izuku returned inside, locking the door behind him as he entered. That had been too close for comfort. He couldn't believe they had found him. What was he supposed to do now? Izuku murmured to himself, tugging at his hair as he made his way to the lounge. He needed to calm down, stressing wouldn't help him at all. It was easier said than done. Those villains had found him, and he was certain they would come back. He flopped onto the soft cushions and turned on the TV, hoping for a distraction. There had to be something that would throw them off his trail or stop them from pursuing him. But what? A new human test subject? The thought made him uneasy. He didn't want anyone else to endure that pain. What if they wouldn't settle for anything less? What if they continued to chase him and hurt those around him until he gave in? The thoughts spiraled out of control. Suddenly, a voice broke through his thoughts, urging him to calm down. His heart rate slowed as he took a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He reassured himself that he wouldn't let them get to him or anyone else. He needed to trust that everything would be all right. After a few days, Katsuki was discharged from the hospital, feeling better than ever. He marched down the street with his parents behind him, a huge smirk on his face, his eyes shining with determination. He felt as if he had escaped a perilous situation. If anyone saw this 9-year-old alone, they might think he had just pulled off something extraordinary. He reached home, relief flooding over him. He turned to his parents, his scowl softening slightly. He asked about Izuku, curiosity in his tone. His mother, however, reprimanded him for his language, giving him a light smack on the head. Katsuki winced, clutching his head, and protested, feeling frustrated. His father sighed heavily as he left for the living room, grabbing the newspaper and settling down. The two ash blondes continued to bicker until a knock at the front door interrupted them. Katsuki rushed to answer, hoping it would be Izuku, but it was just the neighbor complaining about the noise. He slammed the door shut, irritation bubbling within him. He stomped to his room, muttering about the day ahead. He collapsed onto his bed, ignoring his mother's shouts, burying his face in the pillow. As exhaustion hit him, he rolled over and stared at the ceiling, a yawn escaping his lips. He glared at the ceiling as if it were an adversary, raising his hand in frustration before letting it fall back over his eyes. He felt inadequate, frustrated with his own strength. The next morning arrived sooner than Katsuki had hoped. He slammed his hand down on the beeping alarm clock, groaning as he sat up and pulled the blinds open, regretting it immediately. Hissing, he closed them again and stretched. He jumped out of bed, grabbed his black uniform, and headed for the shower. A few minutes later, he dressed in his school uniform and rushed down to the dining table. His mother commented on his tardiness as she placed bacon and eggs on his plate. He dismissed her with a curt response before quickly devouring his meal. After brushing his teeth and fixing his hair, he grabbed his bag and dashed for the door, giving a quick farewell to his parents. He started walking, gradually transitioning to a jog, heading toward the train station where he spotted Izuku sitting on a bench, looking bored. Katsuki called out to his friend, who looked up with a bright smile and waved. He was relieved to see Katsuki and expressed his boredom. Katsuki huffed, sitting next to him, only to be pulled into an unexpected hug. He was startled but soon relaxed, acknowledging Izuku's concern for him. Izuku admitted he had been worried and asked if he could borrow Katsuki's shoulder on the train. Katsuki sighed, telling him not to worry so much and that he needed to get some sleep. When the train arrived, Katsuki took Izuku's hand and guided him aboard, pushing him gently into a seat. Izuku leaned against him almost immediately, falling asleep with soft snores. Katsuki sighed heavily, scrolling through his phone until they reached their stop. He dragged Izuku into their classroom, where his friend collapsed onto the table, face down. Hiyori rushed over, expressing her relief that Katsuki was back and mentioning how worried Izuku had been. Otanashi pointed out Izuku's exhaustion as he lay on the desk, and Katsuki couldn't help but feel a mix of annoyance and concern for his friend. Katsuki expressed his frustration about not getting any sleep. Kanade entered the room, noticing the dark circles under his eyes, and commented on how they were quite noticeable. Yukine suggested that they let him sleep for now, emphasizing the importance of catching up on rest, as being sleep-deprived was no fun at all. Katsuki, however, zoned out of the conversation, glaring at the wall as if it had committed a grave offense. He fell into a trance, staring unblinkingly until the teacher entered with tests in hand. Katsuki groaned, knowing that he was in for a challenging time. It had been 6 years since Izuku and Katsuki began training together, drawing closer to their shared goal of entering the hero course at UA. On the last day of school and junior high, excitement filled the air as everyone eagerly awaited the end of the day. The teacher entered, quieting the buzzing students as he approached the front of the classroom and placed a stack of papers down. He acknowledged their excitement about the end of the school year but quickly shifted the focus, recognizing their aspirations to be heroes. With a flourish, he tossed the papers into the air, prompting everyone to showcase their quirks, except for 2 students. The teacher reminded them that while they all had impressive quirks, there was to be no quirk usage in school. Katsuki, not one to hold back, pointed out that he and Izuku were not like the others, asserting that they would be the best heroes anyone had ever seen. Whispers filled the room as students reacted to the mention of UA, the elite school that All Might had attended. Some expressed disbelief that Katsuki and Izuku would even attempt to get in, while Katsuki declared confidently that they would succeed, dismissing any doubts. Izuku sighed at his friend's bravado, choosing to focus on the artwork he was drawing instead. In his mind, he heard a voice questioning his constant drawing and suggesting he should pay more attention in class. Izuku retorted, defending his passion for art over lectures. The voice acknowledged his sarcasm but continued to tease him about watching All Might movies and spoiling them. Izuku quickly took control of his thoughts, snatching the imaginary movie away and returning his focus to the lecture, though he soon drifted back to his drawing. The rest of the lessons continued in a similar fashion, with Katsuki boasting about their future as heroes, ensuring that no one would forget their ambitions. Lessons passed quickly, and soon lunch arrived. Izuku grabbed his best friend's hand, pulling him away before Katsuki could start another round of boasting. They made their way to the roof, finding it empty and quiet. Katsuki noticed Izuku's unusual frustration and commented on it with a teasing tone. Izuku shot back, pointing out Katsuki's newfound social behavior and his tendency to brag about their hero potential. Katsuki, with a playful grin, threatened Izuku with small explosions in his palms, claiming that Izuku had sealed his own fate. Izuku, unfazed, responded with confidence, suggesting that it was actually Katsuki who was in trouble. The playful banter escalated as Katsuki boasted about his explosive abilities, while Izuku challenged him to a friendly competition. Suddenly, Katsuki launched himself into the air, preparing to attack. Izuku stood his ground, arms crossed, a smirk on his face as he activated his quirk. Time seemed to slow as Katsuki struggled to regain his footing. Once he was up, he prepared for the fight, but Izuku couldn't help but tease him about the inevitable outcome. With a swift punch, Izuku struck Katsuki in the stomach, sending him flying back. Katsuki, determined, pushed himself off the ground, refusing to back down. Izuku winced from the strain of using his quirk but quickly dodged an explosion that Katsuki unleashed. The two continued their playful sparring, with Katsuki taunting Izuku about running out of tricks. As the battle intensified, Izuku devised a clever plan. He stood tall, his hair casting a shadow over his eyes, while Katsuki charged at him. In a surprising twist, Katsuki found himself immobilized on the ground, unable to move. Izuku, with a mischievous smile, revealed that he had used his quirk to gain the upper hand. After a moment, he snapped his fingers, allowing Katsuki to regain his mobility. Once they were both back to normal, they headed down from the roof and finished the school day. Later, they attended the graduation ceremony, where each third-year student received their certificate amidst applause. After the ceremony, Izuku and Katsuki took the long route home, discussing their training and the upcoming entrance exam, which was just 10 months away. They needed to train as much as possible until the exam. Izuku expressed his determination, receiving a nod of agreement from the ash blonde beside him. Katsuki was enthusiastic, insisting that Izuku better make it in, as he needed someone he could actually stand. As they walked under a bridge, they were unaware of the sewer pipe lid rattling behind them. Suddenly, it flung open and a green, slimy villain emerged. He eyed them with interest, noting their powerful quirks and deciding to target Izuku. The green sludge lunged forward, catching the two off guard. They quickly jumped away and ran in the opposite direction. The villain pursued them, managing to trap Izuku. As his glasses fell to the ground and cracked, the villain attempted to force his slimy body into Izuku's mouth. Katsuki, seeing his friend in danger, propelled himself forward with explosive force, shouting in anger. He launched an attack, but the sludge merely laughed, unfazed by the explosions. It retaliated by swiping some of its mass at Katsuki, sending him crashing into a wall. As Katsuki regained his footing, he noticed Izuku's golden eye glowing brightly. Seizing the moment, Katsuki blasted himself off the wall, unleashing a series of powerful explosions aimed at the villain's face. Izuku felt the grip loosen as the villain recoiled, letting out a pained sound. Katsuki threatened the villain, warning him not to touch either of them again, while more explosions erupted from his palms. Izuku used his quirk to freeze the villain in place as Katsuki continued his assault. In the meantime, Izuku called the police to report the attack. Moments later, officers arrived and quickly apprehended the villain, thanking the boys for their help in capturing him. Once the danger had passed, the boys headed home, parting ways at Izuku's house. As he opened the door, he was enveloped in a warm hug from his mother, Inko. He returned the embrace, smiling as she finally let go. Inko expressed her worry about his tardiness, and Izuku reassured her that he and Katsuki had dealt with a villain attack, but they were fine. Inko sighed in relief, though a hint of concern lingered. She guided him to the lounge and brought up the topic of UA, expressing her fears about the potential dangers he might face there. Izuku took her hands, reassuring her that he would be okay and that she didn't need to worry so much. Inko remained concerned, asking if he would be training with Katsuki in the months leading up to the entrance exam. Izuku confirmed this with a smile, and they engaged in light conversation before preparing dinner. The night passed quickly, but Izuku was resolute in his goals. The next morning, both Izuku and Katsuki woke up at dawn, quickly getting ready and grabbing breakfast before rushing out to meet each other. They jogged to the local beach, which had recently fallen into disrepair. They decided to turn cleaning it into a challenge. Whoever cleaned up the most would treat the other to food afterward. Thus, their training began. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as the beach slowly returned to its former beauty. They pushed themselves hard, determined to succeed. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Izuku stretched and exclaimed that they were almost done, just 5 months away from the entrance exam. Katsuki, watching the sunset, remarked that it wouldn't take long to finish. He suggested they head back soon, as his mother had been nagging him about coming home late. Izuku laughed and suggested they jog around the park before heading home. Katsuki agreed, teasing Izuku about who would be buying lunch the next day. They ran to the park, circling it a few times before parting ways. Katsuki jogged further down the street while Izuku entered his house, greeting his mother before heading to his bedroom. He marked the calendar, noting the date for tomorrow, and then grabbed his pajamas before heading to the bathroom. Inko called out that dinner would be ready soon, to which Izuku responded with gratitude. He reflected on their progress and the training schedule he needed to finalize. He considered visiting the library after their lunch challenge to keep up with his studies and to work on the training schedule, ensuring to include breaks. With 5 months left until the entrance exam, Izuku felt excited about the journey ahead. The duo jogged to an abandoned park where they practiced hand-to-hand combat and trained their quirks. Later, they purchased small weapons since Izuku's quirk wasn't suited for combat. At home, they completed 100 push-ups and crunches, and both invested in weights that they used while eating or after studying. They were ready for whatever challenges the exam would present. When the entrance exam day arrived, they jogged down the street to the train station. After buying their tickets and boarding the train, they waited eagerly for what lay ahead. Upon reaching the next station, they exited and walked towards UA, the impressive building's windows sparkling in the sunlight. Izuku gazed in awe at the structure, his eyes shining behind his glasses as they passed through the giant gates. It was enormous, and Izuku's excitement was palpable. Katsuki, smirking beside him, reassured him that they would get in, no matter what, urging him to hurry so they wouldn't be late. Izuku sprinted after his friend, leaping over a stone slab and racing up the building's stairs. He caught up to Katsuki, slowing to a walk, still starry-eyed. They made their way to the announcement room, found seats, and waited for the presentation to begin. As the chatter faded, lights illuminated the stage where Present Mike stood. He welcomed everyone enthusiastically, though the audience's response was underwhelming. Present Mike quickly outlined the practical exam, explaining that they would engage in 10 minutes of mock urban battles. Participants could bring whatever they wanted, and after the presentation, they would head to their designated battle centers. He detailed the 3 types of robots they needed to defeat, each worth different points. A tall brunette raised his hand, questioning the discrepancy in the number of robots mentioned in the handout. Present Mike clarified that the last robot was a decoy and not meant to be destroyed. With the presentation concluding with a spirited plus ultra, the audience finally responded with enthusiasm. The duo exchanged quick good luck wishes before parting ways. Once in the locker room, Izuku removed his jacket and equipped his staff, dagger, and knuckle brass. A small smile appeared on his face as he placed his jacket and glasses in his locker. He closed his left eye and stepped out, heading towards his battle center. Outside, he saw nearly 100 participants stretching and focusing. Among them was the tall brunette, standing with his arms at his sides. Izuku felt a wave of anxiety wash over him, realizing the challenge ahead. He mentally urged himself to stay calm and concentrate on the task at hand. The loudspeaker activated, and present Mike shouted for the exam to begin. As other participants looked around in confusion, Izuku dashed inside, brandishing his staff. He quickly spotted a two-pointer robot, leaping high and striking it down with force, causing it to malfunction and collapse. Feeling more confident, Izuku continued his assault, using his staff primarily but also employing his dagger and knuckle brass when necessary. He systematically took down robots, accumulating 38 points. As he prepared for his next target, a loud bang echoed in the distance, causing everyone to turn in alarm. The ground shook as a massive metal head appeared, its giant hands causing buildings to tremble and crumble. Panic ensued, and Izuku destroyed the robot in front of him before his gaze fell on the towering zero-pointer. He felt his heart race as he watched the chaos unfold. Suddenly, a voice broke through his shock, calling for help. He turned to see a brunette trapped beneath heavy rubble, reaching out in desperation. Izuku felt paralyzed, unable to move. Just then, a surge of determination took over. Deku stepped in, finding the strength to leap forward. He rushed to the trapped girl, using his quirk to lift the debris off her. He quickly carried her to safety, leaning her against a concrete wall while assessing her injuries. One leg was broken, and the other was sprained. Time was short, and he needed to act. He instructed her to stay put, promising to return quickly. With his dagger in one hand and staff in the other, Deku charged towards the giant robot. As its massive fist came crashing down, he narrowly dodged, dust flying everywhere as it struck the ground. Deku leaped onto the metal fist, racing up the arm and reaching its head. He plunged his dagger in, carving out a significant chunk of metal. With the wires now exposed, Deku moved his staff in, severing the wires before jumping back and sliding down the arm. Explosions erupted as he leaped off, landing safely on the ground. He stood tall, turning to watch the explosions, the metal beast collapsing sideways. Deku walked back to the brunette, who stared at him in awe. He knelt beside her and asked if she was okay. She nodded, thanking him for his help. Present Mick's voice rang out clearly throughout the battle centers, announcing that time was up. Recovery Girl entered, distributing gummies to the participants. She approached the duo, and Deku explained what had happened to the brunette. She gently kissed the girl's forehead, and her legs healed almost instantly. Afterward, Deku left, making his way back to the locker room. In his mind, he communicated with Izuku, who had taken control. Izuku expressed confusion about what had happened while he was out. Deku explained that he had taken down the zero-pointer and promised to share more details later. As Izuku left the room, he spotted Katsuki waiting for him at the front gates. Katsuki inquired about the exam, and Izuku replied that it had gone well, expressing eagerness to hear the results. A week passed without any word on the results. Izuku sat idly on the lounge, watching the daily news. A new hero had made their debut, but instead of excitement, he felt anxious. He had only scored 41 points, which might not be enough to pass the entrance exam. He wondered if he would be placed in general studies. However, Deku had mentioned a hidden part of the test involving rescue points for helping other examiners. The quiet room, disturbed only by the soft sounds of the TV, provided a comforting backdrop as he stared off into space. Suddenly, Inko entered the room, holding a letter. She exclaimed that it had arrived, handing it to Izuku, who stared at it in surprise and anticipation. Gratefully, he rushed to his room, shutting the door behind him. He approached his desk, turning on the lamp to illuminate the letter in his hands. With a quick motion, he ripped it open, revealing a small disc that landed on the table. Confusion crossed his face until a hologram appeared. All Might's booming voice filled the air, startling Izuku for a moment. He announced that Izuku had passed the written exam but had just missed the mark in the entrance exam. A frown crossed Izuku's face as he felt Deku groan in disappointment. However, All Might's enthusiastic declaration about a hidden point system caught their attention. Izuku learned that he had received 60 rescue points, meaning he had passed the entrance exam and was welcomed to the Hero Academy. As the projection ended, realization dawned on Izuku, and a wide smile spread across his face. He jumped up in celebration, filled with joy. He rushed out of his room and hugged his mother tightly, repeating that he had gotten in. Inko's face lit up with a smile as she embraced him back. After they broke apart, Izuku grabbed his phone and called Katsuki, jumping up and down with excitement. He interrupted Katsuki's greeting by shouting that he had gotten in. Katsuki was taken aback but quickly confirmed that he had also passed. They both cheered, thrilled to be entering the academy together. Plans were made for training the next day, and Izuku hung up, still buzzing with delight. The following days flew by as the duo prepared for what UA would present them. They woke up, quickly dressed in their new uniforms, showered, and ate breakfast, all in a matter of minutes. They met at the train station, purchased their tickets, and boarded the train. Izuku excitedly shared his thoughts about the amazing experiences awaiting them. Katsuki, slightly annoyed, told him to quiet down, but Izuku couldn't help his enthusiasm. As the train arrived, they exited and made their way up the path to the impressive building. The sun shone brightly on the structure, and Izuku gazed in awe as they entered the massive building. They walked down the halls, where few people were present, until they reached the large doors of Class 1. Katsuki swung the door open dramatically, capturing the attention of those inside. He confidently strolled to a seat by the window, resting his legs on the table. Izuku observed his friend, noting that Katsuki hadn't changed at all. He followed Katsuki into the classroom, closing the door behind him and searching for his desk, which was conveniently located right behind Katsuki. A square brunette from earlier approached Katsuki, attempting to lecture him, but Katsuki quickly fired back with sharp retorts. The door opened once again, revealing a cheerful brunette accompanied by a lively frog girl. Their eyes were drawn to the argument between the impulsive blonde and the assertive brunette. The brunette's gaze then shifted to the green-haired boy behind them. She bounded over to Izuku, the frog girl following closely. She expressed her gratitude for his assistance during the exam, her smile brightening the room. Izuku, a bit flustered, replied that it was what a hero was meant to do, earning a beaming smile in return. Before the conversation could continue, a hoarse voice called out from the doorway, instructing everyone to settle down and find their seats. All heads turned toward the source of the voice, which belonged to a man emerging from a yellow sleeping bag that resembled a cocoon. He unzipped the sleeping bag and stood up, folding it neatly before placing it on the front table. The remaining students quickly found their seats as hurried footsteps echoed from outside. The door swung open, and more students rushed in, taking their places upon seeing the man dressed in black at the front. Once everyone was settled, he introduced himself as Aizawa Shoyuda, their homeroom teacher. He informed them that they would begin with a quirk assessment and instructed them to head to the locker rooms to change into their PE uniforms, asking them to meet him outside in 5 minutes. With that, he walked out, leaving the students to ponder his words. As the students of Class 1A filed out to the field, they found their teacher waiting patiently. They organized themselves into 3 lines, facing him as he uncrossed his arms. He began the lesson, explaining that they would be conducting a practical quirk test to assess their abilities. The brunette called out, questioning the lack of orientation, to which Shoyuda replied that he ran his class differently. He emphasized that heroes did not need orientation and warned those who were not serious about becoming heroes to leave. His cold tone sent shivers down the spines of the students as he declared his intent to mold them into the next generation of heroes. He then called for Bakugo Katsuki to step up. Katsuki approached the front, glancing back at his classmates before standing before Shoyuda. He was tossed a ball, confusion crossing his face as Shoyuda asked how far he could throw it in junior high. Katsuki replied that he could throw it around 67 meters. Shoyuda instructed him to try again using his quirk. Katsuki stepped into the designated circle, stretched his arms, and with a fierce shout, launched the ball into the air. It soared far beyond where the class stood, and Shuda's device registered a distance of 875.04 meters. Gasps filled the air as Katsuki returned to his spot, a smug grin on his face as he stood beside his green-haired friend, arms crossed. Shuda's expression darkened as he warned the class about the consequences of being last in the tests. He announced that they would proceed with a series of mini-tests, starting with a 50-meter track. The students took their turns, with Ida Tenya achieving the fastest time at 2.46 seconds. Next was grip strength, where Shoji Mizo scored the highest with 480 kilos. The standing long jump followed, with Katsuki again taking the lead thanks to his explosive abilities. When it was Izuku's turn, he caught the ball thrown to him, contemplating whose throw to rewind. He decided on Katsuki's impressive throw. As he focused, a golden hue enveloped the ball, lifting it into the air. A transparent clock image appeared before his eye, and with a burst of light, the ball shot forward, trailing a small explosion as it soared into the distance. It landed far away, and the device in Shuta's hand displayed the same distance as Katsuki's throw. Izuku let out a quiet whistle, rewinding time to catch the ball again. He returned to the class, tossing the ball back to Shoyuta as the others continued with their throws. The next test was flexibility, where many struggled due to their focus on strength. The final test was the repeated sidestep, with Mineta Minoru, a smaller student, achieving the highest score. As Shoyuta tallied the scores, a projection appeared from his device, revealing Minoru in last place. The small boy panicked, fearing expulsion. Shoyuta reassured him that, under normal circumstances, he wouldn't actually expel anyone, but after reviewing Minoru's records, he decided to dismiss him from the class. Minoru ran off in tears, and the remaining students exchanged worried glances as Shoyuta announced that class was dismissed and left. The students followed their teacher to the locker rooms, changing back into their regular clothes. As they gathered, the brunette called out to Izuku, noting that she had seen him use Katsuki's throw earlier. Katsuki commented as the students filed out of the locker rooms that he was getting better at rewinding. Izuku admitted he needed more practice, as his eye still hurt afterward, but he chuckled, noting how their teacher could go from calm to furious in an instant. He felt it was best not to provoke him. Katsuki smirked, confident in his abilities, and challenged Izuku to show him just how terrifying he could be later. Izuku, feeling determined, thought about how he could make their teacher cower. Shoyuta collapsed onto a lounge, sighing as he stared at the ceiling. He shifted his gaze to the stack of papers on the coffee table, his eyes landing on the top document labeled Bokugu Katsuki. He rolled his eyes, regretting his decision to become a teacher. He murmured to himself that he better look through the files. As he read through Katsuki's information, he noted the boy's short temper and tendency to explode, both literally and figuratively. Shoyuta sighed in defeat, rubbing his temples as he moved on to the next file, which belonged to Midoriya Izuku. He noted Izuku's cheerful demeanor, his willingness to cooperate, and his troubled past, which included a mysterious disappearance and the trauma that followed. Shoyuta grumbled about having two problem children right off the bat, feeling that this class would be the death of him. When the lunch bell rang, it echoed through the halls, signaling students to pack their bags and rush out to escape their teachers. Class 1A was no different, relieved to have a break from mathematics. Izuku grabbed his bento in his best friend's hand, eager to avoid the lunch line and find a quiet corner to eat. Katsuki noticed Izuku's reluctance to interact with others and pointed it out, questioning his desire to remain closed off. Izuku admitted he felt shy around new people, despite trying to act tough. Katsuki's intense gaze bore into him, urging him to open up. Izuku shot back, reminding Katsuki that he too had a reputation that kept others at bay. He felt the uncomfortable stares directed at his scars since entering the classroom, which added to his anxiety. Katsuki warned him not to panic, not wanting another incident. As they ate, a few classmates managed to break free from the lunch line and approached them. A redhead elbowed his blonde friend and gestured toward Izuku and Katsuki, asking if they could join. Katsuki, uninterested, shrugged and allowed them to sit. The newcomers introduced themselves, with Kaminari Denki and Kirishima sharing their quirks. Ejiro demonstrated his ability to harden his body, while Denki explained his electric quirk. Izuku, feeling a mix of anxiety and curiosity, introduced himself and Katsuki, who remained quiet. Izuku reflected on his own struggles with social interaction, feeling the weight of his past but also the possibility of change. He hoped that this year would be different, even as he grappled with his insecurities. Denki sheepishly scratched the back of his neck, a wobbly smile spreading across his face as he explained the limitations of his quirk. He mentioned that using too much electricity could leave him incapacitated. Izuku chimed in, sharing details about his own quirk, clockwork, which affected his left eye. He pointed to it as he described how it could rewind time for objects, returning them to their original throwers. He could also slow down time or freeze people in place, although it caused discomfort to his eye afterward. The duo listening to him was captivated, their eyes sparkling with excitement. They leaned forward, eager to hear more. Izuku downplayed his abilities, but Ejiru interrupted him, enthusiastically praising the potential of freezing time to stop villains before they could act. Izuku acknowledged the truth in Ejiru's words, and they continued brainstorming scenarios where his quirk would shine, bringing Katsuki into the discussion as well. Their conversation flowed until the bell rang, signaling the start of their next lesson. Suddenly, a booming voice filled the room as All Might burst through the classroom door, announcing his arrival with enthusiasm. The class erupted into cheers, with most students standing and celebrating while a few remained seated in awe. All Might approached the front desk, glancing at their homeroom teacher, who was bundled up in a sleeping bag. The tall hero's smile was as bright as ever, and he addressed the class with his signature energy, announcing that it was their first day of hero training. Cheers erupted once more as All Might revealed that they would be using their hero costumes, which they had submitted for approval. He produced a remote with a large red button, and upon pressing it, suitcases labeled with numbers emerged from the walls. He instructed the students to find their suitcases corresponding to their desk numbers and to change quickly before heading to Fake City 3, where he would be waiting. With that, All Might exited the classroom, and the students sprang into action, grabbing their suitcases and rushing to the locker rooms. Izuku opened his locker and retrieved his hero costume. As he examined it, a smile crossed his face. He changed into the new attire, feeling the soft fabric against his skin. While putting on his pants, he noticed a sash and a ticking noise coming from the suitcase. He discovered a small clock at the bottom, which he clipped to his jacket, thinking it could be useful. After fully dressing, he found a paper at the bottom of the suitcase with a drawing of the complete costume. He felt a sense of urgency and quickly wrapped the scarf around his neck, pulled on his gloves, and tied the sash around his arm before heading out with the remaining students to the fake city, where most of the class was already gathered. All Might stood at the center, surveying the group as the last students joined. Once everyone was present, All Might explained the day's activities. He would divide them into pairs, assigning them to either hero or villain teams. Izuku teamed up with Momo on Team E. All Might noted the odd number of students and assigned Aoyama to Team G. He outlined the objective for the heroes, to capture the villains or touch the bomb hidden in one of the rooms, while the villains could place the bomb anywhere they chose. The first two teams to compete would remain in the area while the others would join him in the camera room. With the teams sorted, All Might took the other students away, leaving Izuku and Momo to strategize. They entered the building assigned to them, where they found a large bomb waiting. After securing it, they made their way to the 5th floor and set the bomb down in a corner. Outside, Katsuki and Ejiru, the hero team, were already discussing their approach. Izuku turned to Momo, asking how they should proceed. Momo contemplated their options, suggesting that one of them should guard the bomb while the other faced off against the heroes. However, she noted that this would put them at a disadvantage since it would be 2 against 1. She proposed setting traps around the room to catch any intruders. Izuku considered their opponents, recognizing that both Katsuki and Ejiru possessed significant strength. He speculated that Ejiru would likely take on a defensive role while Katsuki would be on the offensive. To counter their abilities, they would need a strategy that involved long-range attacks to deal with Katsuki's explosive powers while also addressing Ejiru's hardened skin. If they could neutralize Katsuki first, they could then focus on subduing Ejiru together. If one of them could hold Kirishima back while the other took care of Kaken, they would be in the clear. Momo placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, noticing his mumbling. His face flushed red in embarrassment as he stumbled over his words. He apologized, acknowledging that old habits die hard, and then asked Momo if she could create a long staff. The hero team entered the building once the 5 minutes were up, sticking together despite Katsuki's complaints. They found the stairs leading to the second story, scanning for any signs of the villain team. As they moved up the stairs and across the marble flooring, they listened intently for any sounds. Katsuki, who had taken the lead, glanced back at his partner, Eiju, who was looking around frantically, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he tried to focus. The second flight of stairs leading to the third floor appeared before them. It was too quiet, and Katsuki sensed that something was about to happen. He smirked as he peered over the top of the stairs, confident that he could counter whatever plan the nerd had devised. Silence filled the hallway leading down to the next flight of stairs, only interrupted by the hero's footsteps. A sudden thud made them stop, brows furrowing as they stared ahead. An almost inaudible laugh echoed down the hallway, sending shivers up their spines. Katsuki clenched his fists, glancing at his teammate, who stood ready for a fight. The laughter grew louder, accompanied by silent footsteps. A shadow stretched down the hallway, alerting the hero team. The sound of metal clunking on cement echoed between the laughter as the shadow loomed larger. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, as did the sound of footsteps. Katsuki and Eiju stood still, eyes locked on the figure casting the shadow. They activated their quirks, waiting for the other to make the first move. An image of a transparent clock formed where the villain stood, the long hands striking 12. Time seemed to slow down, and a flicker of green passed the heroes before they found themselves on the ground. Izuku called out for Momo, urging her to act as he jumped back over the heroes, who struggled to regain their footing. A long string of tape was fired from a bow, another following closely behind. Izuku ducked under the tape, watching as the heroes sprang to their feet and dashed to the hallway walls to avoid it. Katsuki shot forward, propelled by his explosions. Izuku held his staff in front of him, focusing intently. Katsuki collided with the staff, kicking Izuku in the gut and sending him away. Izuku landed on his feet just as Eiju rushed past him, his arms hardened as he struck Izuku's staff. Momo created a shield from her arm, rushing forward to block Eiju's next attack. Izuku skidded to the side, running toward Katsuki, who had propelled himself forward. He met the long silver staff swinging down on his shoulder, sending him to the ground. Katsuki kicked himself up, swinging his leg around to trip Izuku. He grabbed Izuku's hoodie and pulled him up, delivering a powerful blow to his chest. Coughing, Izuku flung his legs up and kicked Katsuki off him, using the staff to regain his balance. Swinging it around, he struck Eiju's rib, causing the redhead to stumble. Momo seized the opportunity to knock him down, grabbing the tape from her belt. However, Eiju was quick, ripping the tape from her hands and pushing her away. Katsuki shouted for Eiju to forget about fighting and find the weapon, insisting he would handle the two of them. Eiju nodded and sped off, rushing up the third flight of stairs to locate the hidden bomb. Momo considered following him but ultimately decided to assist her teammate. She turned to see the two engaged in hand-to-hand combat, bruised arms and legs aiming to knock each other down. Pulling a second staff from her arm, she rushed forward and swung at Katsuki's back. He jumped back just in time but found himself frozen in midair. His crimson eyes glared down at his friend, noticing his clock-like eye glowing brightly. Katsuki growled through gritted teeth, frustrated that he couldn't clench his fists. Izuku, with a sweet smile, assured him that even if Momo hadn't intervened, he would have been able to freeze him anyway. Momo caught the tape thrown to her and began to tie the struggling blonde up, placing him on the ground once she was done. With a grin, Izuku released his quirk, and the villain team duo rushed away, waving to Katsuki as they vanished up the stairs, leaving him to curse in frustration. The duo hurried down the hallway and up the stairs, slowing to a jog as they passed empty rooms. Upon finding the bomb room, they entered to see Eiju covered in mouse traps, struggling to locate the bomb. Izuku and Momo stifled their laughter at the sight of their classmate. Izuku approached Eiju, holding a roll of tape. Eiju noticed Izuku and backed away, triggering more mouse traps scattered around the room. Izuku nodded to Momo, who began to walk forward. They circled the redhead and soon tied him up, opting to remove the mouse traps that littered his skin. All Might's booming voice soon filled the air, declaring the villain team the winners, and the duo cheered at their victory. Eiju, still confused, asked where the bomb was, noting it wasn't in the room. Izuku helped him up and guided him to the window, pointing up to the next floor where the bomb was taped down to the concrete walls. Ajuru's mouth fell open in disbelief as Izuku chuckled, explaining that they had placed it there in case someone got past them. Using both of their quirks, Momo and Izuku had managed to stick it up there without any issues. Ru was left speechless, staring at the giggling greenette in front of him, realizing the extent of their clever plan. And it seemed it worked without any issues. Momo celebrated with Izuku, giving him a high five as they cheered once more. They returned the bomb and decided to rescue Katsuki from his boredom before leaving the building. They made their way to the room where their classmates and All Might awaited. Izuku reflected on how well things had gone. He was just happy they had won, although he noted that Katsuki seemed to be in a foul mood after losing. He thought it best to give Katsuki some space to cool off. It was party time after all. They had just achieved a victory with someone he barely knew, combining their quirks to succeed. That was a significant accomplishment for him, especially since he usually preferred not to engage with others. Izuku mused that perhaps he should take some mental notes from the other battles, as they might prove useful later. The exercise continued with fight after fight, pitting the hero team against the villain team. The students had to collaborate with classmates they had known for only a short time, while some were paired with friends from junior high. The final battle featured Ida Tenya and Uraraka Achiko on the hero team against Ashido Mina and Sato Rikido on the villain team, ending with the heroes claiming victory. A loud alarm rang out, signaling the start of the next lesson. All the students from Class 1A headed to the locker rooms, with some going straight to the infirmary to tend to their injuries. Izuku changed back into his formal uniform with his classmates and made his way to the classroom, where Cementos was waiting patiently. Cementos taught modern literature, and Izuku anticipated the groans from his classmates. He chuckled silently as he took his seat, hearing the familiar sounds of annoyance from the others as they entered. A small smile crossed his face as he pulled out a book, flipping to a blank page to start drawing. His classmates filed in, collapsing into their seats, most expressing their boredom while a few remained quiet. Cementos's voice rang out, capturing the attention of nearly everyone in the room, except for a few who wore blank expressions. He picked up a marker and began writing on the board, a stream of words flowing from his mouth as he wrote. Izuku sighed, realizing it would be a long lesson. He flipped back to a blank page, jotting down the notes Cementos wrote on the board. When the lesson ended, Present Mix's enthusiastic voice filled the room, announcing that school was out and the students were free to go. Izuku packed his things and asked Katsuki if he wanted to come over. Katsuki shrugged, saying he was sure his mother wouldn't mind, and they should hurry to catch the train. Izuku nodded and followed his friend as they made their way out of the school and down the corridors to the large glass doors. Just as they were about to leave, two familiar voices called out to them. Ajuru and Denki rushed out of the school building, waving their hands as they caught up. They skidded to a halt, catching their breath and grinning widely. They expressed relief at not having lost their friends, explaining that they would have waited if asked. Denki sheepishly admitted they should have said something and asked if they were headed for the train station. As they walked off school grounds, Izuku confirmed Denki's question, and they turned down the street, chatting animatedly. Katsuki grumbled quietly to himself, clearly annoyed by the noise. Upon reaching the station, they bought their tickets and waited for the train to arrive. When it did, the doors opened, and people flooded in. Katsuki exclaimed in frustration about the crowd, wishing he could teleport to avoid the hassle. Izuku joked that if he had $1 for every time he heard Katsuki swear, he would be rich. Katsuki scowled but sat down, muttering about Izuku's greed. Denki chimed in, pondering the usefulness of a quirk that allowed one to teleport, even if it wouldn't help in a fight. Izuku celebrated Denki's agreement with a fist bump, while Katsuki shook his head in exasperation at his friend's antics. He turned his gaze out the window, watching the scenery blur by as he listened to their chatter. As he relaxed, he noticed Katsuki drifting off to sleep, a small smile appearing on Izuku's face. When they finally reached their station, Izuku helped Katsuki off the train, supporting him as they parted ways. He playfully remarked on how heavy Katsuki was, earning a quiet "shut up" from his tired friend. As they walked, Izuku looked up at the sky, watching the colors fade with the setting sun. It had been an eventful day, and he was relieved it was finally over. All the lessons combined with the new hero training program had been overwhelming, especially with the added physical education classes. It was frustrating for Izuku. He felt that while it may seem overwhelming to others, it was merely a stepping stone toward their ultimate goal. He believed that once they reached that point, everything would make sense. Until then, he urged his friend to endure the challenges they faced together. A week passed quickly for the students of UA, bringing a new dawn filled with anticipation. Izuku jumped out of bed, silencing his alarm clock before hastily opening his closet. He grabbed his uniform and rushed to the bathroom to get ready. After bolting down the stairs, he devoured his breakfast before washing his plate and racing back upstairs to grab his bag and phone. Inko, his mother, reminded him to slow down as she handed him his lunch. She understood he was excited about the school trip but wanted him to take his time. Izuku stuffed his lunch into his bag and hurried to the door, putting on his bright red shoes. He expressed his enthusiasm about visiting the USJ, a place he had heard so much about. He also mentioned that Katsuki had been urging him to hurry since he woke up. Before leaving, he ran over to his mother and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, bidding her farewell. As he dashed out the door, Izuku spotted his best friend standing on the pathway, engrossed in his phone. Katsuki looked up, their eyes meeting briefly before he pocketed his phone and walked alongside Izuku. The excitement bubbled out of Izuku as he talked about the upcoming trip, though he quieted down when Katsuki playfully slapped his head. They made their way to the train station, purchased their tickets, and waited for the train to arrive. Katsuki pulled out his phone and earplugs, sharing one with Izuku, who accepted it with a wide smile. They traveled in silence, the music filling their ears as the train screeched to a halt. Once they boarded, they found seats and remained quiet until they reached UA. Upon exiting the station, they headed toward the impressive building. Inside, they made their way to their classroom, where their classmates were buzzing with excitement about the trip. The two friends settled at their desks, and Izuku began to share his enthusiasm once more. When Aizawa entered the room, he quickly commanded attention, instructing everyone to suit up for their trip to the USJ. Once they were ready, he announced that they would be boarding a bus. The students scrambled to grab their suitcases and change quickly, eager to embark on their adventure. Tenya, the class president, attempted to organize everyone by seating arrangements, but the bus's layout made it difficult. As they traveled to the USJ, the class engaged in discussions about their quirks, comparing their abilities and strengths. When the bus came to a stop, Aizawa called everyone off, and they eagerly exited, excitement radiating from them. Upon entering the USJ, they were greeted by 13, another hero. 13 welcomed the students and introduced them to the USJ, explaining that they would conduct rescue missions in teams across various disaster zones. Aizawa then assigned the teams and zones, instructing them to rescue as many civilians as possible within half an hour. The students quickly formed plans as they headed to their respective zones. Izuku and his teammates arrived at the mountain zone, where he emphasized the importance of being cautious of falling rocks. They decided to split their roles into medic, rescuer, and defender. Katsuki confidently claimed the role of defender, ready to use his explosive abilities, while Edger hesitantly chose to be the medic. Izuku took on the rescuer role, suggesting they rotate tasks every 10 minutes. As they began their mission, Edger led the way, spotting civilians trapped under boulders. Izuku joined him in lifting the heavy rocks, while Katsuki stood ready to clear any additional debris. They carefully transported the civilians back to their medic camp, ensuring they were comfortable and safe. After checking on them, Izuku and Katsuki returned to the mountain to continue their search. While Izuku helped another civilian, he noticed rocks beginning to tumble down the mountain. He swiftly maneuvered to avoid danger and made it back to the medic camp, placing the rescued person down gently. He checked in with Edger, who suggested looking higher up for more individuals in need of assistance. The groups rotated through the disaster zones, each team gaining valuable experience. Eventually, Shoyuta called everyone back for a break, observing as they collapsed in the center, exhausted but exhilarated by their efforts. The teachers grabbed the students' bags and tossed them aside. The class quickly retrieved their lunches, eagerly eating to quell their hunger. Sighs of relief filled the air as some students flopped onto the ground while others leaned on one another for support. Izuku turned to Katsuki, who was resting against him, and asked if he wanted to visit the new cafe after class. Katsuki responded with enthusiasm, expressing how much he needed a treat after the exhausting day. He mentioned wanting to ask his mother if he could have Izuku over for another movie marathon, noting that they had a collection of amusingly bad films piling up. Izuku smiled and nodded in agreement, feeling excited about the idea. With their energy restored, the class stood up, ready to tackle the next challenge. Shoyuta assigned the groups to their next disaster zone but was interrupted by a swirling mass of purple and black that caught his attention. He exchanged a concerned glance with 13, who also noticed the ominous sight. Shoyuta tightened his grip on his scarf, preparing to instruct his students to flee at a moment's notice. As the swirling mass expanded, a hand emerged, swatting aside the air as a man dressed in black, covered in hands, stepped out, followed by bulky mutant villains. Shoyuta shouted for everyone to retreat to the entrance immediately, positioning himself and 13 in front of the students for protection. 13 urged the class to run as they scrambled up the stairs, but 2 students hesitated. Tenya paused when he noticed Izuku and Katsuki standing still. He rushed back, placing a firm hand on Izuku's shoulder, startling him. Just as he was about to urge them to follow, a scratchy voice interrupted him. The villain, with blood-red eyes gleaming from behind the hands covering his face, taunted Izuku, who was frozen in fear. Tenya saw the panic on Izuku's face and quickly exchanged a determined look with Katsuki. They both grabbed one of Izuku's arms, pulling him back up the stairs as Shoyuta engaged the villains. Izuku stood still, watching as the villain unleashed the swirling mass toward them. He felt a surge of panic and, with a sudden burst of strength, pushed his friends away just as he fell into the portal. The portal closed behind him, leaving Katsuki in shock. Rage quickly replaced his disbelief as he screamed, tears brimming in his eyes. He turned his fury toward the retreating mass, igniting explosions in his palms and launching himself forward. Spotting a metal plate hidden within the warp gate, he seized it and slammed it into the ground, repeatedly punching it in a fit of anger. He leaped back just in time to avoid a massive hand reaching for him. With a powerful explosion, he struck the mutant's face, sending it staggering back, tears streaming down his cheeks. Ignoring Tenya's calls for him to stop, he focused solely on the villains who had taken his best friend. As he plunged into the fray, a few classmates decided to join him. Shudo unleashed a torrent of ice, freezing some villains in place, while Eju, Mina, and Tsuyu rushed down the stairs to assist, ignoring 13's warnings. They fought valiantly, covering each other's backs as they took down the surrounding villains. Eventually, most of the villains lay incapacitated on the ground. They turned their attention to the hand-covered villain, who scratched at his neck, his displeasure evident. He sighed in frustration, commanding Kurogiri to summon the Noumu. The students watched as Kurogiri opened another portal, from which a bulky bird-like creature emerged, its exposed brain glistening as it let out a fearsome roar. Katsuki tensed, recalling his first encounter with the creature 6 years prior. He turned to Shoyuta, urgency in his voice as he warned him not to underestimate the beast. Shoyuta acknowledged the warning but instructed Katsuki to stay back. Katsuki refused, insisting they wouldn't abandon their teacher to face the creature alone. With a resigned sigh, Shoyuta relented, allowing his students to join the fight. As the Noumu charged forward, Shudo was the first to act, shooting a mountain of ice to freeze it in place. Mina unleashed acid toward its brain, only to see it vanish into a portal and reappear beside the creature. Shoyuta wrapped his scarf around the Noumu while Katsuki blasted around it, heading straight for Kurogiri, with Edger following closely behind. As he reached out to grab the metal plate within the mass, a portal opened right in front of him. Ru grabbed his leg, darting to the side before throwing him back toward the portal. He triggered explosions on the metal plate once more while keeping Shigaraki at bay, striking him back with hardened hands. As the struggle continued, the doors burst open. All Might rushed in, followed closely by UA teachers. He leaped down the stairs, delivering a powerful punch to the Noumu. Noticing that the beast remained unharmed, he unleashed a rapid series of punches, shattering the ice encasing the creature before launching it into the air, sending it flying out of the USJ. Shigaraki managed to fend off Edru and remove Katsuki from Kurogiri, who created a portal, vanishing in an instant. The boy lay in silence and pain, feeling as if everything hurt. He couldn't move or see, darkness surrounded him. He longed to escape the agony, feeling cold and trapped. The sound of a door creaking open echoed through the room, alerting him to the presence of another. A tall figure loomed over him, a sinister smile spreading across his face as blood-red eyes glinted with delight. The figure leaned down, stretching an arm out and placing a hand on the boy's head, causing him to flinch. The boy pleaded for Shigaraki to stop. Shigaraki asked if Izuku was ready, but the boy could only whimper in response, too frightened and in pain to speak. Regardless of his state, Shigaraki declared it was time for their experiments. He called a Noumu over, ordering it to pick Izuku up and follow him. Izuku curled in on himself, the pain flaring through his bones and muscles as the beast lifted him. They entered a room filled with tubes and tools, with a lone metal table stained red at the center of the table used for the experiments. Izuku was placed down and strapped in, feeling the coldness against his bare back. Shigaraki announced it was time to begin. He grabbed a needle filled with a clear liquid and injected it into Izuku's neck. The boy braced himself for the pain that would follow. As Shigaraki removed the needle, a sharp sensation gripped Izuku's bones, as if 1,000 needles were piercing him at once. He bit his lip to suppress a scream, writhing in agony. A hand gripped his arm, and he calmed down slightly, his breaths ragged. Shigaraki smirked as he picked up a knife, dragging it down Izuku's arm, watching as blood pooled on the cold table. He reveled in the sight of the boy's suffering. Shigaraki plunged the knife into Izuku's stomach, observing the boy squirm as he fought to stifle another scream. He carved downwards, blood flowing rapidly. After lifting the knife, he wrapped his fingers around Izuku's wrist, watching the flesh peel away to reveal red muscles. He then grabbed a new needle filled with a purple liquid and injected it into the exposed muscles, watching the liquid drain into the boy's bloodstream. After removing the needle, he summoned the Noumu, which picked Izuku up and carried him to a test tube. Shigaraki opened the tube, allowing the Noumu to place Izuku inside before sealing it and letting green liquid fill the container. Shigaraki left the room, the Noumu following him, and took a seat at the bar. He looked up at Kurogiri, a smirk on his lips as quiet laughter escaped him. Kurogiri placed a clean glass on the counter and began to clean another when a knock sounded at the door. Both turned, surprised by the unexpected visitors. The door burst open, narrowly missing Shigaraki as a horde of heroes rushed in, All Might leading the charge. His smile faded as he confronted the two villains. All Might's commanding voice filled the air as he ordered the heroes to find young Midoriya and bring him home. Kurogiri quickly warped Shigaraki into the testing room while he and the Noumu fought off the heroes. Shigaraki slammed his hand on the release button, the green liquid rapidly clearing before the door opened. As he grabbed hold of Izuku, the door behind him burst open. All Might calmly instructed Shigaraki to drop the boy. Shigaraki tightened his grip around Izuku's throat, staring into All Might's eyes, causing the hero to freeze. A short cackle escaped Shigaraki's lips as a grin spread across his face. He taunted All Might, saying there was no chance of saving Izuku and that he should give up or face dire consequences. As he inched his finger closer to Izuku's neck, shock and anger washed over All Might's face. Suddenly, a bullet struck Shigaraki's arm, causing him to drop his guard and watch blood seep from the wound. He caught sight of All Might launching himself forward. Turning to Izuku, he reached out but was too slow. All Might pulled the boy away, holding him close as he jumped back. Snipe and Ectoplasm entered the room, ready to spring into action at any moment. Shigaraki's voice echoed loudly as the warp gate appeared beside him. Ectoplasm's clones rushed forward to intercept, but the villains had already escaped. The clones dissipated as both heroes turned to All Might, who was holding an unconscious Izuku in his arms. He looked up at the two, then back down at the boy, whispering, "Mission success." Class 1A was on edge. It had been 2 weeks since Izuku was kidnapped and another 2 since he was rescued. They were anxious about when he would be released from the hospital and dreaded thinking about what the villains might have put him through. They sat in silence, waiting for their teacher to bring them news. Their heads snapped up as the classroom door swung open. Shoyuta walked in, slightly slouched as he made his way to the front. He turned abruptly to the class, dark circles under his eyes. Everyone awaited his words, eager to learn about their friend's condition. As you all know, Midoriya was hospitalized in serious condition, he began, watching everyone tense at his statement. We're not completely sure what happened to him while he was with the villains, but he is in stable condition. A few sighs of relief escaped the students. His physical state isn't too bad, but his mental state has changed. He'll be coming in later. Please don't startle him with loud noises or touch him. Be mindful of his wounds, both physical and mental. He turned his tired gaze to Katsuki. Bakugo, you should see him first. He'll want you around. From what we've seen, he doesn't like being alone for too long. He's currently in the teacher's lounge with Cementos and Snipe. I suggest you go see him now. Katsuki nodded and stood up, rushing to the door and down the hallway. He skidded to a halt outside the teacher's lounge and slowly opened the door. His crimson eyes immediately found a mop of messy green hair. He murmured Izuku's name, watching as the boy turned his head. Katsuki walked over, circling the lounge until he stood in front of his friend. A small smile graced Izuku's face as he opened his arms. Katsuki embraced him tightly, tears streaming down his cheeks. He expressed his relief, grateful that Izuku was back. Izuku's voice trembled as he spoke, sharing his fears. He stood up and wrapped his arms around Katsuki, still feeling the lingering pain in his bones. He clutched Katsuki's clothes, closing his eyes tightly as he silently cried. Katsuki held his friend close, resting his head on Izuku's as they shared a moment of comfort. After a while, they released each other and turned to the teachers, who nodded in acknowledgement. The duo wiped their eyes and headed out, with Izuku holding on to Katsuki's hand, feeling safer in his presence. As they approached Class 1A, a wave of nervousness washed over Izuku while standing outside the imposing door. He took a deep breath, tightening his grip on Katsuki's hand and glancing up at him. Katsuki slowly opened the door, causing the students inside to turn and stare. The duo stepped in, and their classmates' faces brightened with smiles. A few students, including Edru, Denki, Achiko, and Tenya, rushed over to their injured friend, exclaiming their joy at his return. Izuku nodded slightly, unsure of how to respond as they all huddled together. He felt a sense of happiness wash over him as he embraced them in a group hug, a soft sigh escaping his lips. They released each other as Shoyuta gained everyone's attention, and they settled into their seats, ready to listen to their teacher. Now that you're all settled, I have some more news. A week from now, the sports festival will be held. A few students cheered while others murmured among themselves. From this point on, you'll all need to train to prepare for the festival. Many heroes will be watching you perform. If you want to make a name for yourselves, you need to shine there. This will allow heroes to choose who they wish to mentor in internships. You'll start training with All Might after lunch. Meet him at the fake city in your hero costumes. With that, the bell rang through the speakers, signaling lunchtime. Everyone jumped up from their seats and rushed out the door to the cafeteria. Izuku and Katsuki stayed behind to avoid being swept away by the crowd, having wisely brought their lunches. They pulled out their bento boxes and turned to each other, enjoying a comfortable silence as they ate. Occasionally, they exchanged small talk, but they appreciated the quiet moments as well. Katsuki broke the silence, expressing his excitement for the sports festival and his determination to excel. Izuku nodded in agreement, sharing his own enthusiasm but also his lingering fears about controlling his quirk. He hesitated, unsure if he should ask for help, but Katsuki interrupted him, insisting that he would support him regardless. They finished their meals, and as the bell rang again, they prepared for the next class, eager to embrace the challenges ahead. A week flew by quickly, and everyone was ready for the sports festival. The atmosphere was electric as Class 1A geared up for the festival, eager to secure internships and the chance to become sidekicks in the future. Excitement buzzed through the air as students changed into their gym uniforms, chatting animatedly. Some playfully declared rivalry against each other, mirroring the competitive spirit of other classes. Present Mix's booming voice echoed through the loudspeakers, announcing the classes. The crowd erupted in cheers as the hero classes made their entrance, followed by the general studies, support, and business classes. Everyone gathered as Midnight stepped onto the stage to kick off the first round. A few students averted their eyes, noticing her hero costume. She brandished a whip, capturing the attention of everyone in the stadium. She greeted the students, heroes, and spectators, welcoming them to the sports festival. The crowd's cheers intensified. Midnight then called for Bakugo Katsuki to step up and represent his class. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Katsuki approached the microphone, declaring his intention to win. Booing erupted from the audience, with some students hurling insults while others glared in disapproval. Izuku sighed heavily, face-palming in disappointment as Katsuki returned to his side. In response to a playful slap on the head from Izuku, Katsuki growled, but the camaraderie remained. Midnight announced the first round, an obstacle course. Students clustered at the starting gate, eagerly awaiting the signal. When the green light buzzed, they surged forward. Shudo froze the ground, momentarily halting everyone else as he rushed ahead for an early lead. Students struggled to break free from the ice and catch up. Izuku grabbed onto Katsuki as he propelled them both forward, reaching the first obstacle, the entrance exam robots. The towering zero-pointers cast ominous shadows over the students who had managed to get ahead. Izuku hesitated, recalling the moment he had blacked out during the entrance exam. He wondered about Deku, feeling a sense of unease. Something felt off, almost glitch-like. As he opened one eye, a transparent clock image appeared before him, pulsing rhythmically until everything around him froze. In this black and white world, he noticed he was the only thing in color. Realizing he needed to act, he sprinted forward until time resumed. He dashed past the robots, slipping under the zero-pointers to reach the next challenge, a gorge pit. Time returned to normal, color flooding back as sound filled his ears, and he felt a sharp ache in his eye. With determination, he leaped onto a pole connecting platforms, pushing off with all his might. Behind him, he could hear explosions and shouts, likely from Katsuki engaging in a fierce competition with Shudo. As he navigated the pole, his foot slipped, but he quickly grabbed hold, swinging his legs up for support. He climbed onto the first platform, glancing around to see Shudo gliding across on ice. Katsuki soared above him, determined to claim first place. The commotion behind indicated that other students were closing in. Izuku used the same tactic, leaping from the pole and bouncing off it, his arms ready to catch him if he slipped again. He reached the end and sprinted toward the final obstacle, skidding to a halt at the sight of a minefield. Shudo and Katsuki were already racing toward the finish, their rivalry reignited. Ignoring the pain in his eye, Izuku focused on the ground, carefully navigating the mines as he approached the two competitors. With a burst of speed, he dashed forward, disregarding the mines beneath him. Glancing back, he saw Shudo and Katsuki trailing behind, momentarily forgetting their fight for first. They all crossed the minefield, racing toward the finish line. Present Mix's voice rang out, announcing the winner. The audience fell silent, watching as a figure emerged from the tunnel. Bakugo Katsuki burst forth, skidding to a halt and sending dust flying. Shudo Todoroki followed in second, with Izuku Midoriya in third. The crowd erupted in cheers, their excitement palpable. Students flooded in, congratulating one another for making it to the second round. Izuku praised Katsuki for his victory, expressing his surprise at how close the race had been. Katsuki, with his trademark smirk, declared his determination to win, dismissing any notion of letting Shudo surpass him. Midnight called everyone over as the round concluded, and the relieved students approached the stage. She congratulated those who advanced and announced the next round, the Cavalry battle, explaining the rules and point system. All eyes turned to Katsuki, who had amassed an impressive 10 million points, his smirk widening as he considered his team. Students rushed to form their groups, and Katsuki quickly gathered Izuku, Ejuru, and Mina, who had solidified their friendship during the festival. After securing his headband, Izuku strategized, aware that nearly every team would be targeting them. He explained their plan in a hushed tone, emphasizing the importance of dodging and blocking attacks to maintain their score. If they lost it, they would need to retaliate against the team that took it. Izuku suggested they grab as many headbands as possible to ensure they could still advance, even if they lost their own. He noted that while most teams would focus on them, others might adopt different strategies. Katsuki would take the lead as the rider, with Kiri at the front. In case of an emergency, Izuku planned to slow or pause time to find an escape route. Ashido, along with Kaken, was tasked with offense, so they needed to keep an eye out for any teams advancing their way. His three teammates nodded in understanding. Present Mike announced that they had only 1 minute until the battle started. They formed a line with Katsuki at the front, Kiri in front, Mina on the right, and Izuku on the left. Katsuki tied the point band around his forehead, a large smirk on his face, with a fierce glint in his eyes. A few teams shuddered at the thought of getting too close to the feral wolf but braced themselves for the battle about to begin. Midnight's voice rang out loud and clear, signaling the start of the cavalry battle, sending teams into a flurry of dust and quirks. As Izuku had predicted, most teams rushed towards them. His right eye narrowed as he instructed his team to head right. Katsuki cracked his knuckles, hands balled into fists, a deep chuckle escaping him. Mini explosions crackled from his palms, blasting away a hand that reached too close. Izuku and Mina swerved left, acid sprouting from Mina's feet and right hand as they narrowly dodged another team. They kept running and dodging, explosions and acid flying about, forming a dust cover around them. They rushed out the left side, explosions hitting the opposition as they pressed forward. Present Mick's voice blared through the loudspeakers, commenting on everything the teams did. Soon, the team found themselves surrounded as the opposition took the chance to push forward. A small smile settled on Izuku's face as he took a deep breath, his left eye flying open. The world faded to gray as it froze, leaving only him in color and motion. He pushed his teammates forward, barreling ahead and escaping the circle. An ache in his eye caused it to close, color and noise flooding back in as everyone resumed motion. He urged his team to keep pushing forward, not wanting to repeat their previous predicament, earning nods of acknowledgement from his teammates. He warned Katsuki of an approaching threat on his left. Katsuki spun around, unleashing an explosion towards a classmate who had gotten too close. The team continued to run, their explosions and acid keeping opposing teams at bay. Izuku turned his head left, sensing another presence, and spotted Shudo's team inching forward. His gaze landed on Tenya, who was at the front. He took a breath, recalling what Tenya might do to gain their points. He had seen it before during training when he passed Tenya on his way home, stopping to watch the powerful boost that rendered his engines useless for a time. Izuku alerted his team to Team Todoroki's presence and expressed his concern that Ida might use a super boost to grab their points. He advised them to keep an eye on any reaction from him, knowing that if they weren't careful, they could lose their points. As the minutes ticked down, Izuku felt an ache in his left eye, but he focused back on Shudo's team when Mina called out a change in Tenya's engine ignition. Present Mike announced that there was 1 minute left. The ache in his eye had mostly subsided, but it still lingered. He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as his eye fluttered open just as Tenya boosted forward. The world turned gray again, the throbbing in his eye intensifying as he pulled his team to the left, moving far enough away from the opposing team before the pain forced his eye to close again. Tenya flew away, shock on his face as he realized what Izuku had done. Izuku smiled brightly as he ran away, apologizing to Ida for not letting him take their points. Present Mike shouted that time was up, likely causing Shuda's ears to ring from the intensity of his voice. The leaderboard appeared next to midnight on stage, revealing Team Bakugo in first place, Team Todoroki in second, Team Shinso in third, and Team Monoma in fourth. Izuku cheered and hugged his teammates, excitement coursing through him. Mina and Idru hugged back, cheering loudly. Katsuki sighed, patting Izuku's head before turning away, glaring at the opponents around him. His gaze settled on Shudo, who was glaring back with cold, sharp eyes. Katsuki clicked his tongue and turned his gaze away as Midnight announced the next game. Before she could finish, Mashireo and another student from Class 1B announced that they didn't want to continue since they didn't remember the last event. Midnight respected their decision and asked for 2 people from Team Kendo to step up to take their places. Kendo announced that she would like to give the opportunity to Team Tetsutetsu, much to their delight. He and his teammate Ibra took the 2 free places, thanking Kendo before Midnight finished her announcement of the last game. The final game for this year's sports festival was revealed to be one-on-one battles. Present Mix's voice boomed through the loudspeakers, earning cheers from the stadium. The first matchup was announced, featuring Izuku and a purplish-haired student from General Studies. Shinso Hitoshi from Class 1C was called forward, and the crowd cheered as he walked up to the giant cement block produced by Cementos for the battles. Then, from the heroics class, Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A stepped out of the tunnel into the blinding sunshine and loud cheers from the crowd. Standing at his end of the cement block, he looked over at his opponent as Midnight stood to the side to start the match. She asked if they were both ready, and they nodded. The match began. Hitoshi initiated conversation, mentioning how he had wanted to be in heroics but was denied entry due to his quirk not being suited for the test. Izuku thought about Hitoshi's mental quirk, presuming it had something to do with verbal responses. He realized that as long as he kept his mouth shut, he could win. Hitoshi pressed for a response, teasing Izuku about not speaking, suggesting that perhaps his friend had silenced him. Izuku gritted his teeth, choosing to remain silent against the taunts directed at him. He thought it was sad that Hitoshi's friends weren't defending him. With determination, Izuku lunged forward, fists clenched, and struck Hitoshi in the stomach, sending him tumbling backward toward the edge of the stadium. Hitoshi quickly regained his balance and rushed forward, narrowly dodging Izuku's sweeping kick. He turned just in time to block a punch from Izuku, but the force of the blow staggered him back. Izuku pressed the advantage, pushing Hitoshi until he lost his footing and fell out of bounds. Midnight announced that Hitoshi was out of bounds, declaring Izuku the winner as the crowd erupted in cheers. Izuku approached Hitoshi and extended a hand to help him up, complimenting his effort in the match. Hitoshi, scratching the back of his neck, expressed his frustration about not being able to use his quirk, feeling that it had cost him a better chance. He remarked on how Izuku, being in the heroics course, was fortunate compared to others who were merely there to make the heroes look good. Izuku frowned, understanding the weight of Hitoshi's words. He shared that he knew what it felt like to be at the bottom, to feel helpless and without control. He reassured Hitoshi that he was not alone and offered his support if he ever needed someone to talk to. Hitoshi nodded in acknowledgement before heading back into the tunnel. Izuku felt hopeful that Hitoshi would be all right as he turned to leave the block and made his way down the steps. As he settled into the stands beside Denki, he noticed that Shudo and Hanta were absent, preparing for their match. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement until Present Mix's voice boomed through the loudspeakers, announcing the next competitors. The crowd roared in anticipation as Hanta stepped onto the stage, looking a bit sheepish, followed by Shudo, who maintained a stoic expression. Midnight raised her whip, signaling the start of the match. Hanta declared his determination to try his best as he shot his tape from his elbows, wrapping it around Shudo and attempting to swing him across the arena. Shudo countered by freezing the tape before it could reach the boundary, shattering it with a stomp that sent shards of ice flying toward Hanta. Despite Hanta's efforts to evade, he found himself encased in a large block of ice, unable to move except for blinking and breathing. Midnight, partially frozen, checked on Hanta, who admitted he couldn't move. She declared Shuto the winner, and the crowd cheered, albeit with a hint of fear from the ice surrounding them. Shuto approached Hanta, placing a hand on the ice before releasing him from its grip. He then turned and walked back into the shadows of the tunnel, joining his classmates to watch the next match as the crowd buzzed with excitement. Present Mix's voice rang out again, announcing the next round featuring Kaminari Denki from Class 1A against Shizuki Ibara from Class 1B. Ibara, displeased with being labeled an assassin, expressed her desire not to be associated with such a title, radiating a gentle glow as she did so. Present Mike quickly apologized, and Midnight signaled the start of the match. Denki, charged with electricity, asked Ibra if she wanted to grab a bite to eat after the match. He unleashed his electric attack, but Ibra countered by using her vine-like hair to create a barrier. Once the spark settled, she sent her vines underground, which shot up and ensnared Denki, leaving him unable to continue. Midnight announced that Ibra had won, and the crowd cheered as she gently set Denki down before leaving the stage. Denki was carried off on a stretcher, and as Midnight prepared for the next match, Izuku began to analyze Ibra's quirk, discussing its strengths and weaknesses. His classmates found his intense focus a bit unsettling until Katsuki playfully punched him on the head. Midnight then introduced the next competitors, Ida Tenya from Class 1A and Kaibara-san from Class 1B. Present Mike, trying to lift the spirits of the crowd, encouraged everyone to get excited as the two students stepped onto the stage, with Sen scanning the arena for his opponent. He cracked his knuckles as Tenya stretched his legs, narrowing his eyes as he focused on Senator. The match began with Tenya lunging forward, his quirk activated as he rushed towards his opponent. Sen dodged to the side with agility, activating his own quirk and charging ahead. Tenya swiftly turned and ducked under Sen's attack, his drill-like arm jabbing just above Sen's head. He swept his leg across the ground, tripping Sen and slipping to the side, avoiding the reach of Sen's spinning drill legs. Sen aimed to strike the Blueonette, who quickly regained his footing. They faced each other with determination, lunging forward with incredible speed. Tenya kicked his leg up into the air, aiming for Sen's shoulder, but Sen blocked the attack, giving him an opportunity to retaliate. He slammed his drill arm down on Tenya's leg, causing him to wince in response. Tenya skidded backwards, dodging another strike from Sen's drill-like arms. He grunted and clenched his fists, challenging Sen's abilities. With a swift motion, he executed a roundhouse kick to Sen's torso, sending him skidding toward the boundary. Tenya seized the moment, following up with a gut punch that sent Sen out of bounds. He warned his opponent not to taunt a fellow peer, as it could lead to one's downfall. The announcement rang out, declaring Sen out of bounds and Tenya the victor. The crowd erupted in cheers as Tenya acknowledged Sen with a nod before heading off in the opposite direction. The next match was introduced, featuring Momo Yaoyorozu from Class 1A against Nito Monoma from Class 1B. The two students stepped into the arena, ready to face off. Momo created a long pole and shield, rushing forward as Nito transformed his skin into metal. He sprinted towards her, dodging the pole and striking her shield with a confident smirk. Momo swung her pole to hit him, but Nito deftly swept her off her feet. She landed on the ground, rolling to the side to evade a punch aimed at her face. Quickly regaining her footing, she raised her shield to block another incoming attack. As the barrage of punches continued, Momo found herself unable to counter. Nito paused, jumping back and reverting his skin to normal, his smirk widening. Just then, the announcement declared Momo out of bounds, leaving her surprised as she realized her foot had crossed the line. Her creations vanished as she fell to the ground in defeat. Disappointed, she stood up slowly, a gloomy aura surrounding her as she exited the arena. Present Mike took over the announcement, introducing the next competitors, Katsuki Bakugu from Class 1A and Kuwaro Shirhai from Class 1B. Katsuki entered the stage with a confident smirk, his crimson eyes glinting as he glared at his opponent. The battle commenced with Katsuki unleashing his signature explosions, propelling himself towards Shirhai. Shirhai sidestepped, narrowly avoiding Katsuki's attack. Katsuki landed with a skid, launching another explosion at Shirhai, who braced himself for impact. However, Shirhai was caught off guard when Katsuki grabbed his uniform, swinging him around before sending him outside the boundary. The announcement confirmed Kuwaro was out of bounds, declaring Katsuki the winner. With a triumphant smirk, Katsuki turned and walked off, humming to himself. Izuku cheered loudly for his friend, waving his arms in excitement. As the crowd's cheers faded, Present Mick's voice boomed again, introducing the next match featuring Kirishima Edru from Class 1A and Tetsutetsu from Class 1B. The two students approached the arena, cracking their knuckles as they sized each other up. The match began with both rushing at each other, their skin hardened as they pulled back their fists and slammed them into each other's faces. Tetsutetsu taunted Edru, who stood firm, glaring back with determination. They charged again, the impact of their punches causing them to stumble. Regaining their balance, they struck each other with uppercuts, sending both crashing to the ground with a thud. Groaning, they pushed themselves up and exchanged gut punches, panting as their energy began to wane. They leaned into another punch before collapsing, their chests rising and falling as they struggled to breathe. Their quirks faded, revealing slight bruises where their punches had landed. The announcement declared a tie, and the paramedic team was called to assist the two competitors. Midnight promised another match to break the tie once they had healed. Present Mike then introduced the final match of the first round, featuring Ashido Mina from Class 1A and Tsuburaba Kozai from Class 1B. Mina bounded into the arena with energy, while Kozai approached more calmly. The match began with Mina secreting acid from her feet as she rushed forward, launching acid from her hands towards Kozai. He created a wall of air, catching the acid and watching it dissolve through the solid barrier. He quickly formed another wall of air to shield himself from her next attack. Mina, pouting slightly, turned on her heel and unleashed more acid, attempting to strike her opponent. She skidded back, stopping just short of the boundary before charging forward. She collided with the air barrier and executed a roundhouse kick, sending acid spraying from her shoes. Determined, she declared that he was going down as she kicked him to the ground, following up with another strike to his side that sent him rolling. He quickly created a barrier of air, hitting it at the edge of the boundary. Frustrated, Mina rushed over and melted the barrier with her acid. As she prepared to kick Kozai out, he caught her leg, swinging it around and tripping her, sending her tumbling over the boundary. She landed with a thud, arms and legs sprawled out like a starfish. With a voice booming through the arena, Midnight announced that Mina was out of bounds and Kozai advanced to the next round. Mina stood up, brushing off the dust from her pants, still pouting as she walked away. Midnight continued, stating that both Kirishima and Tetsutetsu had rested up, and to decide who would advance to the next round, they would have an arm wrestle. The two teens approached the arena where Cementos had created a stone pillar. They knelt on either side, placing their elbows on the block. As Midnight called for the start, their quirks activated. They pushed against each other, gripping the cement block tightly, cracking it under the pressure. They grunted and strained, trying to force the other's hand down. This contest continued for several minutes, the crowd's roars urging them on, until one hand was finally slammed down. Midnight announced that Tetsutetsu was down and Kirishima advanced to the next round. After the match, Tetsutetsu, feeling annoyed and frustrated, muttered to himself about not having eaten enough iron that day. He noticed Ejuru extending a hand to him and looked up. Ejuru encouraged him, saying he had done well and should not give up just yet. Tetsutetsu accepted the hand, getting back on his feet. He nodded at Ejuru before turning to leave, while Ejuru watched him go, his smile unwavering. After a brief break, the one-on-one battles resumed. Present Mick's voice boomed through the loudspeakers, igniting cheers from the massive crowd. He introduced the next competitors, the lovely Shizuki Ibra from Class 1B and the speedy Ida Tenya from Class 1A. The two competitors stepped into the arena, facing each other with determination. As the match began, Ibra dug her vines into the ground while Tenya charged forward. She attempted to restrain him with her vines, but he skillfully dodged and pushed her past the line, securing an easy victory. Midnight announced that Ida Tenya advanced to the next round as he helped Ibra to her feet after her stumble. Next, Present Mike introduced Tsuburaba Kozai from Class 1B and Kirishima Ejuru from Class 1A. Ejuru immediately hardened his skin, preparing for the fight. Kozai opted for a defensive strategy, creating an air barrier as Ejuru smashed through it. Kozai dodged a punch aimed at him, producing a thicker barrier. However, as Ejuru grew frustrated, he broke through the next barrier with sheer force, reaching out to grab Kozai and slamming him down, effectively knocking him out. Ejuru placed the unconscious Kozai on the ground, releasing his quirk. Midnight announced that Tsuburaba was unable to battle and Kirishima advanced to the next round, as the crowd erupted in cheers. Robots arrived with a stretcher to carry Kozai away, while Ejuru walked off with pride in his eyes. Present Mike introduced the next match, featuring Monoma Nito from Class 1B and Bakugo Katsuki from Class 1A. Both competitors stepped into the arena, wearing confident smirks. Nito taunted Katsuki, claiming he was ready to lose, while Katsuki, with explosions crackling in his fists, declared he would never lose to someone like Nito. As the match commenced, Katsuki propelled himself forward with a series of explosions. Nito turned his skin to steel, bracing for the impact. Katsuki reached through the smoke, grabbing Nito's wrist and swinging him down. Nito retaliated by launching spikes at Katsuki, who blew them up before charging again. As Nito attempted to strike with a drill-like hand, Katsuki leaped into the air, narrowly avoiding the attack. Nito taunted Katsuki, questioning his abilities. Katsuki, fueled by determination, gripped Nito's arm tightly, swinging him around and causing dust to fly. He was ready to unleash his full power, determined to prove himself in the battle. But now Katsuki wanted to send Nito flying out of bounds. He slammed Nito into the concrete ground outside the lines, creating another crater with Nito's body. Midnight announced that Monoma was out of bounds and that Bakugo advanced to the next round, but her voice was drowned out by the eruption of cheers. Nito pushed himself to his feet, panting as he held his aching stomach. Katsuki smirked down at him, a menacing look in his eyes. A shiver ran down Nito's spine before he sulked away, defeated. Katsuki, still smirking, made his way off the cracked and crater-filled arena and headed into the tunnels. He passed waiting room 1, where Izuku sat contemplating his options. He muttered to himself about the possibility of ending the match quickly while holding back for the next round. He shook his head, slapping his cheeks to clear his mind. If he rushed things, he might end up quirkless, giving his next opponent a slight advantage if he managed to get through. He knew he shouldn't risk it, even if he could fight in hand-to-hand combat. It simply wasn't worth it. If he could slow down time in small intervals, he could wear out Todoroki before pushing him out of bounds. But that was easier said than done. He sighed, standing up and heading out of the room as the last match of round 2 was called. The crowd erupted with cheers as Present Mike announced the last match of round 2. Whistles and claps echoed around the stadium. From the heroics department, the stoic ice class resident, Todoroki Shudo from Class 1A, faced off against Midoriya Izuku, a plain-looking kid with a big heart. Both students stepped onto the arena, determination burning in their eyes. The match began. Shudo launched large ice shards toward Izuku, aiming to take him out in one hit. Izuku dodged to the side effortlessly, his left eye remaining closed as he evaded another attack. Ice decorated the ground as he swiveled and swerved, keeping an eye on Shudo for any patterns in his attacks. Frustration grew within Shudo with each shard that missed, making him increasingly hasty. His attacks became larger, and the ice forming on his arm and leg intensified. He slammed his right foot into the ground again, watching as ice encased half of the field, hoping to trap his opponent as well. For a moment, all was silent before a blur of green emerged from above the ice, crystals falling from Izuku's hair as he stood above Shudo. He leaped down with precision, aiming a kick for Shudo's head. Seizing the opportunity, Shudo released a wave of ice toward the falling kick, intending to freeze Izuku from the bottom up. But just as the ice wave was about to reach him, Izuku vanished from Shudo's view. Startled, Shudo felt a sudden weight and jolt of pain in his ribs as he skidded to the side, quickly turning to see Izuku in a fighting stance. Izuku urged Shudo to use his fire, his eyes glistening in the sunlight. He pointed out that Shudo was doing more harm to himself than to Izuku and noted that he hadn't landed a single scratch. With determination, Izuku leaped forward, raising his fist high before sidestepping another wave of ice. He insisted that Shudo was freezing himself up. Shudo declared that he would not use his fire, stating his vow to never use his father's flames. As ice continued to freeze his arm and leg, the terrain transformed into a winter nightmare. Izuku backed up, dodging the ice until he found himself pressed against the icy ground. He tensed slightly, his right eye fixated on Shudo, who was visibly struggling. Concern washed over Izuku as he noticed how much ice covered Shudo's right side, likely putting him at risk of hypothermia. Izuku urged Shudo again to use his fire, warning him that he would harm himself if he continued this way. He emphasized that the fire belonged to Shudo alone and that no one else controlled it. With clenched fists, Izuku rushed forward, determination evident in his blazing eye, insisting that it was Shudo's quirk. Shudo's eyes widened slightly as Izuku's punch connected with his stomach, sending him backward toward the ice-covered border. Memories flooded Shudo's mind, his mother pleading for him to be spared from further harm, her comforting presence as he cried into her shirt, and her encouragement to stay true to himself. He recalled his father's harsh training and the painful moments that shaped his resolve. As he fell back, all he could do was remember those times. He realized that he was not a prisoner of his lineage and that it was okay to use his power to become who he wanted to be. Blazing fire flickered to life on Shudo's left side, a smile stretching across his face as the flames roared around him. Izuku smiled wider, clenching his fists as he silently cheered, feeling the support of his friends alongside him. Shudo questioned why Izuku was smiling, noting that he had just helped his opponent and given him an advantage. Izuku chuckled lightly, his smile widening. He explained that the essence of being a hero is to help others, regardless of whether they are enemies. He wanted to take the chance to help Shudo. Ignoring Enji's fiery outburst, they focused on their attack. Shudo combined his flames and ice, creating an explosion that lit up the air as he directed the elements toward Izuku. Knowing he couldn't dodge the large-scale attack without leaving the boundary, Izuku opened his left eye and watched as time seemed to freeze. Everything turned to black and white, the onslaught of ice and fire slowing to a halt in a burst of bright lights. Izuku hurried around the attack, stopping behind Shudo just before his eye closed with a painful ache. As everything flickered back to life, color returned, and the flames and ice surged forward. Panting slightly, Izuku grabbed Shudo's arm, feeling the tension radiate through him. He slammed his foot into the ground, pulling Shudo with him as he swung the dual-element user away from his original position. As the fire and ice cleared, Shudo found himself outside the boundary, looking up at Izuku, who extended a hand to help him up. Midnight announced that Todoroki was out of bounds and that Midoriya advanced to the semifinals. Izuku smiled at Shudo, expressing his appreciation for the fight and his gladness that Shudo used his fire. He noted that Shudo was slowly breaking free from his limitations and encouraged him to keep practicing with his flames. As Izuku turned to leave, Shudo walked in the opposite direction, a small smile on his face. Upon entering the tunnel, a wave of pain and panic hit Izuku like a truck. He fell to his knees, his heart racing as he clutched his face and chest. The eruption of panic overwhelmed him, drowning out his thoughts. He began to hyperventilate, the pain in his eye pounding against his head and sending waves of agony through his body. He didn't notice the footsteps approaching or hear the alarmed call of his name. A figure crouched in front of him, but his vision was too blurry to see clearly. Warm, calloused hands rested gently yet shakily on his shoulders, trying to pull him back from the dread that weighed heavily on him. Soon he lost consciousness, his body going limp in his friend's grasp. Katsuki lifted him up and carried him bridal style, rushing toward the nurse's office. He burst through the door, panic radiating from him. Recovery girl turned to the frantic student, seeing Izuku unconscious in his arms. She instructed him to place Izuku on one of the beds. Katsuki complied, his worry evident as he explained that Izuku had another panic attack, though he hadn't seen it happen. Recovery girl assured him that she would contact Yamada and advised Katsuki to prepare for his match while they fixed the arena. Katsuki nodded and left. Present Mike announced that the arena had been repaired and it was time for the semifinals. He introduced the first match, featuring Kirishima Edru from Class 1A and Bakugu Katsuki, the resident hothead. Although still troubled from earlier, Katsuki wore his signature smirk as he faced his opponent. Edru immediately hardened his skin when Midnight announced the start of the round. Katsuki propelled himself forward, slamming his sparkling palm into Edru's hardened face, creating a large explosion at point-blank range. He leaped back, taking a fighting stance as the smoke cleared. Edru emerged from the smoke, fist raised and barreling toward Katsuki. Katsuki countered, blasting his hand away before delivering a powerful kick to Edru's side. He launched his opponent toward the boundary, skidding to a halt just before the line. He turned to meet Ejiru's fist, sending him stumbling over the line. The announcement confirmed that Kirishima was out of bounds and that Bakugo advanced to the finals. Katsuki's smirk widened. Ejiru, pulling himself up, murmured that he had hoped to last longer and encouraged Katsuki to win, though he wouldn't mind if Midoriya won as well. Katsuki declared that he was determined to win the tournament and wouldn't go easy on anyone, even Izuku. As he walked toward the nurse's office to check on Izuku, an announcement from Present Mike interrupted his thoughts. It was revealed that one of the final competitors was unable to participate, so Todoroki Shudo would take his place. The next match would feature Ida Tenya from Class 1A against Shudo. Katsuki shook his head, trying to clear his mind as he entered the nurse's office. His gaze fell on the unconscious Izuku resting on a bed. He pulled a chair over and glanced at Recovery Girl, who stood a few meters away. Before he could ask about Izuku's condition, Recovery Girl informed him that Izuku might not wake up for a few more hours. His mind was jumbled, but he would be fine in time. Katsuki turned his attention to the TV in the corner, showcasing the ongoing fight. Shudo managed to freeze Ida's engines before tossing him out of bounds, winning the match and advancing to the finals. A heavy sigh escaped Katsuki as he turned back to his friend, determination filling his eyes and igniting a fire within him. He stood up, heading to the door and glancing back once more before exiting the room, closing the door softly behind him. Roars and cheers filled the stadium as Present Mike announced the last match of the tournament. Katsuki and Shudo glared at each other, both eager to prove their strength. At midnight signal, both boys launched their attacks. Ice erupted from Shudo's foot as he stomped on the ground, sending a flurry of large shards racing toward Katsuki, who propelled himself forward with explosive bursts. He placed his hands in front of him, powering up a massive explosion that shattered the ice upon contact. Shaking the icy spikes from his sandy ash-blonde hair, Katsuki lunged toward his opponent, skillfully dodging the waves of ice shot in his direction. Frustrated with the ice, Katsuki decided to conserve his heat to create a larger explosion. Dodging wave after wave of ice while trying to land a hit on Shudo, Katsuki accumulated sweat from his sudden, jerky movements. Irritation mixed with determination fueled his fiery personality as he let his quirk surge through his arms. Sparks erupted around his palms before a loud explosion tore through the cold air, sending a heat wave pulsing across the stadium. Smoke filled the air, obscuring everyone's view of the stage and the opponents. Katsuki leaped backward as he felt a cold wind brush against his skin, narrowly avoiding a pillar of ice. Through the smoke, his sharp gaze caught sight of a flickering light within, attempting to clear the smog that cloaked Shudo. As the smoke began to dissipate, Katsuki got a good look at the dual-haired boy, who stood strong and resolute. Ice and fire rippled at Shudo's sides, his eyes narrowed and brows furrowed. A smirk crept across Katsuki's scowling face, a determined glint in his eyes. He raced forward, explosions propelling him faster toward his opponent, who reached out his hands, fire blazing as ice shards increased in size, creating a large-scale explosion from the contrasting temperatures of their quirks. Katsuki dug his feet into the ground, crouching with his arms shielding his face as the waves of heat and cold hit him in cycles, engulfing him in the attack. He felt the sting of his skin as burns and frost layered his arms and legs, his sports uniform melting and tearing from both sides. As quickly as the attack came, it vanished into nothingness. Staggering to stand straight, Katsuki exhaled heavily, panting slightly as sweat rolled down his arms and face. A grin spread across his features. Rubbing his chin, he glared at Shudo, who appeared out of breath from executing such a large-scale attack. Seizing the advantage, Katsuki lunged forward on singed and frostbitten legs, ignoring the sharp pain that coursed through his muscles and veins as he rushed his opponent. He raised his right arm and delivered his signature right hook, powered by a large explosion, striking Shudo in the chest and sending him backward and out of bounds. The crowd erupted in loud cheers and whistles as midnight declared him the winner of the sports festival. Katsuki celebrated, pride radiating from him as he held his fist high to the sky. Shudo staggered to his feet and nodded in approval to Katsuki, clutching his left side as he walked off, limping slightly. Katsuki, now smirking wider than ever, followed suit, heading back into the tunnel he came from. The arena was cleared, and all contestants who made it to the final round were lined up in the center of the field, watching the 3 pedestals in front of them. Katsuki stood tall and proud on the highest point, Shudo on his right and Drew on his left on the lowest pedestal. And now, let's welcome a special guest. A bulky figure landed beside Midnight, dust erupting from where he landed. All Might. Have no fear. For I am here, he cheered, raising a fist high as his signature smile lit up the arena. Congratulations to those who made it to the final round, and to everyone who participated in this tournament. I will now present our winners with their medals. All Might received a box containing the 3 medals from Midnight. He approached Edger first, taking out the bronze medal and placing it around his neck. Congrats, my boy. You fought well, he said, giving him a hug and patting his back before moving on to Shudo. You did great out there, young Todoroki. He hung the silver medal around Shudo's neck and embraced him as well. Finally, facing Katsuki, he draped the golden medal around his neck, watching as Katsuki's smirk widened. Congratulations on winning, young Bakugu. Wear this medal with pride. After giving him a hug, All Might stepped down from the pedestals and faced the crowd, who cheered and screamed with enthusiasm. Please give these 3 winners a loud cheer. The noise grew even louder, almost reaching Present Mix's level of excitement. And remember, always go beyond. Plus Ultra. With the festival finally over, the students filed out of the stadium with the crowd, giddy and excited. Katsuki managed to wake Izuku and help him home, though it was a challenge as Izuku leaned on Katsuki for support the entire way. They made it home and enjoyed a celebratory dinner with both families, with Katsuki bragging about his victory the whole time. As the 2 families ate in peace, far away in a rundown bar, Shigaraki pondered over the sports festival. A grin crossed his face, a half-hearted cackle escaping his throat as he replayed all the fights from the semifinals and finals. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm sure our next visit will be quite entertaining. After a day of rest following the sports festival, UA was back in action once more. Students buzzed about, chatting excitedly about the festival and the reactions from those who watched them. Class 1A was no different, filled with an excited atmosphere as they chatted giddily. Izuku and Katsuki were no exceptions, with Izuku enthusiastically recounting everything that had happened and what he had missed. However, all noise in the room slowly dissipated as the door slammed open and shut, courtesy of Shoyuda. Everyone sat down and quieted, though some still twitched with excitement. Shoyuda cleared his throat as the buzz faded. As you know, the sports festival was a way to prove yourselves to everyone, as well as a chance to get scouted for internships. A significant number of offers had come in for everyone in the class. With the click of a button on a remote, a graph appeared on the board. The offers were varied, with most heroes opting to choose those who had won. Even if a student's name didn't appear on the board, they still had offers to consider. They could spend this time sorting through their options and deciding which heroes they wished to intern with for the week. The teacher mentioned he would be available for any questions as he settled into his sleeping bag on the floor to rest. Izuku observed the impressive number of offers for both himself and Todoroki, noting that it was no surprise given their success in the competition. He slouched over the table, contemplating the task ahead. Katsuki acknowledged this, nodding slightly as he scanned through his own stack of papers. He reminded Izuku to focus on his own offers, pointing out that Izuku had also performed well in the competition. Izuku began sorting through his offers, creating 3 piles: those he liked, those he disliked, and those he was unsure about. After some time, he narrowed it down to 20 forms from the original stack of over 100. He glanced at Katsuki, who had similarly reduced his pile to around 35 offers. As Izuku analyzed the forms, he noted the heroes' specialties in battle and rescue. He considered the various heroes available to him, recognizing that many focused on combat. He thought about taking Present Mix's offer, as it could help boost his confidence and provide him with valuable experience. After making his decision, he organized his offers into a neat stack on his desk, wondering which hero Katsuki had chosen. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the lesson, Shoyuta emerged from his sleeping bag and left the room, with Cementos taking his place. The students were given 15 minutes to continue reviewing their offers before the lesson resumed. Sighs of relief filled the classroom as everyone submitted their chosen offers to Shoyuta at the end of the day. He explained the next steps for their internships, emphasizing the importance of following their mentor's instructions and avoiding any reckless behavior. The students responded affirmatively, and Shoyuta dismissed them, encouraging them to rest and prepare for the upcoming week. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as the students packed their belongings. Izuku asked Katsuki about his internship choice, revealing that he would be interning under Present Mic. Katsuki shared that he had chosen Best Jeanist, appreciating the chance to learn from a different type of hero. They agreed on the value of seeing things from a new perspective as they made their way home, exchanging goodbyes as they parted ways. Class 1A was filled with anticipation as they prepared for their internships. After saying their goodbyes, they boarded their trains to neighboring cities. Izuku settled into his seat, calming his nerves while music played in his ears. The ride to Present Mix Agency was brief, and soon he found himself standing outside the building, which also served as a radio station. Upon entering, Izuku was greeted by the exuberant hero, who welcomed him with enthusiasm. Present Mic quickly began showing him around the agency, introducing him to the crew and explaining how the station operated. In just a few minutes, Izuku had a good grasp of the agency's layout. Present Mic then shifted the focus to their work, announcing that they would start with combat training and patrol later that night. Izuku eagerly agreed, feeling a surge of excitement. Present Mic also mentioned that Izuku could join him on his radio show the following day to help boost his confidence and gain exposure. He paused to confirm that Shoyuta had instructed the students to choose their hero names, to which Izuku affirmed that they had indeed made their selections. Though Izuku had some difficulty coming up with his hero name, he scratched the back of his neck with a sheepish grin. He looked away, fiddling with his fingers as he revealed that he had chosen the name Eternal Stiffen, believing it fit his quirk perfectly. Present Mic, full of enthusiasm, praised Izuku's choice, assuring him that once he announced himself to the world, he would quickly gain a fan base. He excitedly called Izuku the freezing time hero, expressing confidence in his potential as a hero. Izuku, feeling embarrassed, muttered his thanks and tried to hide his flushed face. Present Mic encouraged him to be less formal and suggested he call him Yamada-sensei when they were at the agency. With a hand on Izuku's head, he ruffled his hair and declared it was time to start training. As they patrolled the city, Present Mic reminded Izuku to stay vigilant, as criminal activity increased at night. Izuku nodded, determination shining in his eyes as they moved through the streets, stopping minor villains and thugs along the way. After a long night, they returned to the agency to rest. After a quick shower, Izuku changed into a simple shirt and shorts and entered the room assigned to him. He sat on the bed, glancing at his suitcase containing his hero costume in the corner. Grabbing his phone from the bedside table, he began texting Katsuki. He asked how Katsuki was doing and if the agency he chose was what he wanted. Katsuki's response was filled with frustration, expressing his dissatisfaction with the place and questioning how he would survive a week there. Izuku felt a mix of sympathy and concern for his friend, hoping Katsuki wouldn't cause too much trouble during his stay. As he contemplated the situation, Izuku reminded himself that they needed to get some sleep for the busy day ahead. He closed his eyes and sank into the soft mattress, letting sleep take over. The next morning, Present Mic's loud voice jolted him awake, announcing the start of a new day. Izuku groaned, glancing at the clock that read 6 a.m. He questioned what they could possibly be doing so early and wondered if they were training. Present Mic confirmed that they were indeed training and urged Izuku to get into his hero costume, promising they wouldn't stop until he dropped. Izuku thought it was far too early for such enthusiasm, but he complied, grabbing his suitcase and heading to the bathroom. After getting dressed, he made his way to the training room where Present Mic awaited him, a large smile on his face. Izuku felt a mix of nerves and determination as he prepared for the day ahead. As the radio show began, Present Mic welcomed the listeners back to Put Your Hands Up Radio, introducing Izuku as a special guest. He encouraged Izuku to be louder, but Izuku felt unsure of himself. Present Mike explained that Izuku was training to be a hero but lacked confidence, and they would be engaging in a few segments during the show. The first segment involved a random questionnaire from a listener. Present Mike posed a humorous question about adults getting adult-napped if kids were kidnapped. Izuku pondered the question, reasoning that it seemed illogical for adults to be targeted in such a way. He suggested that children would be easier to kidnap due to their protective parents. The next question came from another listener, asking what would happen if Izuku used his quirk on himself. Izuku hesitated, admitting he had never tried it and doubted anything would happen. He felt a bit anxious as he continued to answer questions, but he was determined to push through and gain confidence in himself as a hero. Izuku felt the weight of the previous night's events as he stretched his back and arms, relieved that the show had concluded. He marveled at how Present Mike could handle such stress weekly, wondering how his mentor maintained such enthusiasm. Present Mike, noticing Izuku's fatigue, encouraged him, explaining that once he became a pro hero, he would find himself in the spotlight more often than he could imagine. He playfully ruffled Izuku's hair, dismissing his protests, and urged him to prepare for their patrol in Hosu. Izuku nodded, turning the doorknob to exit the soundproof room and heading to his guest room to get ready. He mentally steeled himself, fists clenched in determination as he left the room. He found Present Mike waiting by the tinted glass doors, and they exchanged nods before heading to the train station. After purchasing their tickets, they boarded the bullet train to Hosu. As Izuku gazed out the window, the cityscape blurred into streaks of color, with vibrant oranges and yellows painting the sky. Suddenly, he felt a jolt of tension as he noticed flames outside. He tapped Present Mike's arm to point it out, but before he could finish his thought, a hero was thrown against the train as a hulking Noumu burst through the wall. Present Mike quickly reassured the passengers to remain calm and evacuate while he confronted the creature, sending it flying out of the train. With the hero following suit, Present Mike turned to Izuku, instructing him to use his quirk only to help others or in self-defense. They jumped down from the train, running along the tracks and into a chaotic scene of a city under siege, filled with panicking civilians and battling pro-heroes. Izuku focused on escorting civilians to safety, his eyes scanning the area until he spotted the pro-hero Manuel, who was calling out for Ida. Panic surged within Izuku as he realized Tenya was missing, and he felt a sense of urgency to find him. Determined, Izuku rushed to Present Mike, expressing his intent to locate Ida, who was likely searching for the hero killer. Present Mike cautioned him to avoid dangerous situations and to act like a true hero. With a nod, Izuku dashed into the streets, thoughts racing as he searched for any sign of his friend. The sound of metal clashing echoed in the distance, quickening his pace as he called out internally for Ida to hold on. In a dimly lit alleyway, the hero killer, Stain, stood poised with his katana, ready to strike. The pro-hero native struggled against the wall, unable to move. Stain's attention shifted when he noticed Tenya charging toward him, his armor glinting. In the moonlight, Stain's blade caught Tenya's suit, sending him sprawling to the ground. Despite the fear coursing through him, Tenya glared defiantly at Stain, identifying him as the hero killer. Tenya pushed himself up, fueled by the memory of his brother. He declared his intention to stop Stain, revealing his identity as Ingenium's younger brother. Stain, intrigued, warned Tenya to choose his words carefully, hinting at the danger he posed. Undeterred, Tenya stood tall, vowing to honor his brother and confront the villain. As they faced off, silence enveloped the alley. Tenya charged at Stain, attempting to land a kick, but the villain evaded effortlessly. Stain taunted him, asserting that both he and his brother were weak. With a swift motion, he struck Tenya, causing him to cry out in pain. Tenya, however, refused to back down, determined to prove his strength and protect his brother's legacy. He was paralyzed from the waist down due to spinal cord damage, unable to continue his work as a hero. Tenya reflected on his brother's past heroics, recalling how Tensei had saved countless civilians and inspired him to dream of becoming a hero himself. The thought of someone crushing that dream filled him with rage. He vowed not to forgive the villain responsible for his brother's condition. Stain pointed to Native, who was struggling to breathe against the wall, and urged Tenya to save him first. He criticized Tenya for being consumed by hatred and using his powers selfishly, claiming that such actions were the opposite of what a true hero should embody. With a menacing gesture, Stain brought his blade to his mouth, tainted with blood, declaring that Tenya would meet his end. Tenya felt frozen, unable to move, panic rising within him. He muttered in defiance, unwilling to accept his fate. Stain taunted him, suggesting that if Tenya admired him, he might become a great hero. Tenya countered, insisting that Stain was nothing but a criminal who had harmed his brother. Suddenly, a fist struck Stain, sending him away from Tenya. Regaining his footing, Stain glared at the newcomer, Midoriya Izuku. The green-haired boy quickly assessed the situation, noting that both Tenya and Native were incapacitated. Frustration bubbled within him as he prepared to confront Stain, who raised his blade, eyes cold and calculating. Izuku asked Tenya if he could move, but Tenya could only respond with a pained admission. Izuku, feeling the urgency of the moment, removed his glasses and activated his quirk. Time slowed to a crawl as he swiftly moved Tenya's motionless body to safety outside the alley. He then returned to Native, lifting him up just as time resumed. A sharp headache throbbed in his mind as he exited the alley, aware of Stain's presence. Izuku placed Native beside Tenya before turning to face Stain, who lunged at him. The clash of metal echoed as Izuku defended himself with his staff. Stain acknowledged Izuku's heroism, noting that saving others before engaging in battle was a true mark of a hero. However, he warned that if Izuku continued to protect what he deemed false heroes, he would not hesitate to eliminate him. Ignoring the pain in his head, Izuku sent an SOS message to his classmates and present Mike, focusing entirely on Stain as he advanced. Gripping his staff tightly, he braced for Stain's next move. Stain attacked with both blades, but Izuku managed to block the strikes, pushing back against the villain. He attempted to counter with a kick, landing a hit on Stain's chest, but Stain quickly retaliated. Izuku realized that Stain's intent was not to kill him but to eliminate Tenya and Native. He remained alert, listening for any sign of backup. As Stain prepared for another strike, Izuku dodged and swung his staff, but missed. Stain's agility allowed him to evade and counterattack, forcing Izuku to block again. Desperation grew within Izuku as he fought to hold his ground. He felt a blade pierce his side, pain radiating through him as he stumbled back. Stain liked the blood from his blade, relishing the moment. Izuku felt a sudden weight pressing him down, realizing it was Stain's quirk paralyzing him. Stain declared that he would not allow Izuku to stop him from ridding the world of false heroes. As he moved toward the alley exit, a burst of flames erupted around him, forcing him to retreat. Shudo appeared, his arm ablaze, ready to confront Stain. He informed Izuku that he had called for backup, and Endeavor would arrive soon. Relief washed over Izuku, but he quickly warned Shudo about Stain's ability to paralyze through blood ingestion. Shudo created an ice barrier for protection while keeping his fiery arm ready. He lifted Izuku, carrying him to safety as ice shards flew past them. Stain, undeterred, leaped out, blades ready to strike. Shudo unleashed his flames, forcing Stain to dodge, but not before Stain threw knives, embedding them into Shudo's arm and causing his flames to flicker. He snapped his head up to the villain as a blade grazed his cheek, a small trickle of blood appearing. Stain lunged forward, his tongue flicking out to taste the blood before flames ignited once more. He fell back, holding his katanas close to his face, his cold, harsh glare fixed on the dual-haired boy. Izuku felt the paralysis that had weighed heavily on him lift, and he staggered to his feet, leaning against the wall as his headache began to fade. Gripping his staff tightly, a fire ignited within his eyes. He leaped off the wall, extending his staff and striking Stain in the gut, sending him crashing into the wall and creating a small crater, dust showering down around him. Stain picked himself up from the crater and charged toward Shudo, aiming a blade at his face. Shudo lost his balance and fell backward, vulnerable to the impending attack. As he closed his eyes, he heard the sound of metal clashing. Opening his eyes slightly, he saw Tenya kicking the blade away from him, as well as Stain. Tenya landed in front of Shudo, turning to him and nodding. He expressed his regret for the situation, admitting that it had been intended as his fight alone, but he felt too weak to face Stain alone. A determined look crossed his face as he declared their need to stop the villain together, acknowledging his earlier mistake of running off. He turned to face Stain, who had regained his balance and was crouched, ready to strike. They needed to work together. Izuku noted Tenya's resolve and readied his staff. He asked if everyone was prepared, and the two nodded, Shudo's arms enveloped in fire and ice as Tenya activated his engines. With a shout, they launched their combined attack at Stain. Izuku paused time as he saw Stain leap into the air, rushing toward him. He quickly intervened, tossing Stain back down into the attack before jumping back himself, resuming time. The fire and ice struck, searing Stain's skin and freezing him in place. Tenya followed up with a powerful kick to Stain's gut, shattering the surrounding ice. Stain was flung back into the wall, teetering on the edge of collapse. Shudo froze him again, and Izuku sprang forward, delivering the final blow that knocked the villain out. They all breathed heavily, the adrenaline fading and the pain from their wounds beginning to throb. Sighs of relief escaped them. After breaking the ice off Stain, they tied him up with a cable wire they found and carried him to the entrance of the alley where natives sat, no longer paralyzed. They placed the villain down and noticed flames inching closer every second. The three heroes in training felt the tension in their shoulders dissipate, replaced by exhaustion. The heroes finally arrived, spotting the three students, Native, and Stain. Present Mike rushed out from the crowd of heroes and embraced his intern, dramatically expressing his relief. As the police and paramedics arrived, Izuku heard a low growl in the distance. He looked up to see a dark shape illuminated by the moon, flying overhead and rapidly approaching. He shouted for everyone to get down, pushing his friends to the ground just as a giant beast, a flying Noumu, swooped down. He felt its talons grip into his ribs, lifting him off the ground. Struggling against the tight hold only caused the talons to dig deeper. He called out for help, feeling his consciousness begin to fade, allowing Deku to take over. With determination, he jabbed his staff into the Noumu's side, then its head, and finally its brain, eliciting a loud screech of pain. The grip on his ribs loosened, and Deku kicked the beast in the chest before dropping from its grasp. He began to fall, the wind pressing against his scarred back. Gritting his teeth, he twisted to face the ground and extended his staff toward it. He glanced up just in time to see the hero killer stab the flying Noumu in the brain, effectively defeating it. Deku focused back on the ground, moving his metal staff into the concrete and swinging around it, landing softly. He retracted the staff and ran over to where his mentor, classmates, and heroes stood, gazing up as the Noumu fell to the ground alongside Stain. Standing before his mentor, he ignored the stares and whispers, concentrating on Stain. The villain rose, glaring at the heroes and students, his bloodlust palpable, freezing everyone in place. He let his words sink in, declaring that this society, filled with fake heroes and criminals wielding power carelessly, needed to be purged to create a more just society. He turned toward Enji, his bloodlust intensifying. He accused Endeavor of being a fake and insisted that someone must have died in blood for true justice to be restored. He challenged the heroes, declaring that the only one worthy of defeating him was the true hero, All Might, pointing his bloody blade at Izuku, who felt his breath hitch. As a wave of pressure washed over everyone, Stain collapsed into unconsciousness, leaving the heroes and students staring at his fallen form. Taking control back, Izuku looked at the defeated hero killer lying next to the fallen Noumu, just meters away. He glanced back at his classmates and mentor, uncertain of what to do. Endeavor was the first to move, walking over to Stain and lifting him up. The hero dragged the villain to the officers, who had been frozen in place with the rest of the group. They quickly sprang into action, securing Stain and placing him in the back of their vehicle. As they left the scene, paramedics tended to the wounds everyone had sustained while the students were questioned by their mentors. Present Mike expressed his relief, acknowledging that while he had allowed them to search for Ida and act in self-defense, he never expected them to confront the hero killer. He lightly tapped Izuku on the head before enveloping him in a tight hug, grateful that he was safe. Izuku felt a wave of relief wash over him as he realized that nothing had happened to his friends. Tenya was being scolded by his mentor while Shuto avoided eye contact, looking anywhere but at him. Soon, medics arrived to take them to the nearest hospital, where they were swiftly checked in and taken to a room. After receiving treatment for their wounds, they were encouraged to sleep until morning. As Izuku closed his eyes, he found himself in his mind, where he saw Deku sitting on a lounge. He rushed over and embraced him tightly. Izuku expressed his gratitude repeatedly, thanking Deku for being a lifesaver. Deku chuckled softly and patted Izuku's head, assuring him that it was nothing and that he was just glad Izuku was safe. He emphasized that they were in this together, and if one of them were to fall, they both would. Izuku giggled and sank into the cushions next to Deku, resting his head on his shoulder. He sighed softly, reflecting on the exhausting events of their internships. As Izuku relaxed, Deku encouraged him to rest and offered to monitor his body while he slept. Izuku laughed lightly, letting sleep take over as he rested his head in Deku's lap. The next morning, a loud voice echoed through the clinic, waking the 3 students. They groaned in unison, wishing for more sleep, but the voice of Present Mike urged them to wake up as they had a special guest. Slowly, they sat up, rubbing their eyes and yawning. A new voice introduced itself as Manuel, who entered the room with a large man with a dog head. The man, Tsuragami Kenji, explained that he was there to discuss the previous day's incident involving Stain. He informed them that they had used their quirks in public and had landed significant blows on Stain, who was now receiving treatment for his injuries. Kenji noted that while Present Mike and Endeavor had covered for Izuku and Shuto, Tenya had acted independently in seeking out the hero killer. He warned that they would face consequences for their actions, especially since they did not yet possess their provisional licenses. Guilt washed over Tenya as he absorbed Kenji's words. The officer also mentioned that news of Stain's defeat was spreading, and Izuku and Shuto would be in the spotlight, with reporters eager for a story. Manuel approached Tenya, playfully, scolding him as Tenya apologized for his actions. Present Mike enveloped Izuku in a tight hug, while Shuto remained seated, observing the situation. Izuku, feeling overwhelmed, asked when they would be able to leave the hospital. Present Mike assured him that they could leave once they were healed. Shuto expressed that he was ready to return, as Endeavor would be waiting for him. Tenya, determined to make amends, promised to return to school and fulfill his responsibilities as class president. Izuku laughed lightly, relieved to see Tenya's spirit returning. After being checked out, the 3 friends said their goodbyes, each more determined than ever to become heroes. In the midst of the chaos, the hero known as Eternal Stiffen stood resolute, embodying the essence of time itself. With a quirk that allowed him to manipulate moments, he felt the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. As he navigated through the challenges ahead, he recalled the lessons learned from past encounters, each one shaping him into the hero he was destined to be. Eternal Stiffen had faced formidable foes, each battle testing his limits. He remembered the intense confrontations where he had to outsmart his opponents, using his abilities to freeze time just long enough to gain the upper hand. The thrill of victory was always accompanied by the bittersweet taste of loss, reminding him of the sacrifices made along the way. As he prepared for the next challenge, he reflected on the name that had become synonymous with his identity. While others suggested names like Timekeeper, he felt a deep connection to Eternal Stiffen. It was a name chosen by a dear friend, one that resonated with his journey and the legacy he aimed to create. With determination in his heart, he stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The path was fraught with danger, but he was not alone. Allies stood by his side, each one a testament to the bonds forged through trials and tribulations. Together, they would confront the darkness, armed with hope and the unwavering belief that they could make a difference. As the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, Eternal Stiffen knew that this was just the beginning. The stories yet to unfold would shape not only his destiny but the fate of those he fought to protect. With every heartbeat he embraced the journey, ready to write the next chapter of his life.